They said she was cursed, dangerous, unworthy of a mate bond that every wolf her age received without question. But when Alpha's son stood before the entire pack and spoke the words that would shatter her world, Naira Vale learned something far worse than rejection. She learned that power makes people cruel, and that the pack she'd trusted her whole life had been waiting for this moment, waiting to be rid of her. If you want to see how a broken girl becomes the one who breaks the system that destroyed her, stay until the end. And don't forget to hit like and tell us what city you're watching from in the comments. The bonfire burned so high that Nira could feel the heat from where she stood at the edge of the gathering circle. 20 feet of flame reaching toward a moonless sky, sparks spiraling upward like desperate prayers that would never be answered. Around her, the pack had formed concentric rings. The elders closest to the fire, then the mated pairs, then the warriors, and finally the young wolves waiting for their own bonds to snap into place. Naira stood in the outermost ring, alone. She'd known something was wrong when her mother hadn't met her eyes that morning, when her father had left the house before dawn without saying goodbye, when the other girls her age had stopped whispering and gone completely silent as she'd walked past them on her way to the ceremony grounds. But she'd come anyway, because this was the bonding night, held once every 5 years when the moon went dark and the old magic still worked, because she was 19 and unmated, and tradition demanded she stand in this circle and wait for the pull that would tell her who she belonged to. The drums started, low and rhythmic, matching the heartbeat of the earth itself. Elder Moira stepped forward, her white hair gleaming in the firelight. She raised her hands and the drums went silent. "We gather under the dark moon to honor the oldest law," Moira's voice carried across the circle. "The law that binds wolf to wolf, soul to soul. Tonight, the unmated will find their place. Tonight, the pack becomes whole." Nira's fingers trembled. She clasped her hands together to hide it. Around her, she could feel the weight of eyes. Hundreds of them. The pack was massive, nearly 3,000 wolves spread across the northern territories. But tonight, it felt like every single one of them had shown up to witness the bonding ceremony. The air smelled like pine smoke and anticipation. Someone's child was crying somewhere in the crowd. The sound quickly shushed. "Kieran Thorne," Moira called out. "Step forward." The crowd parted like water. Kieran emerged from the inner circle, moving with the fluid confidence of someone who'd never doubted his place in the world. He was the Alpha's only son, broad-shouldered, dark-haired, with eyes that seemed to catch and hold the firelight, 22 years old and already commanding his own unit of warriors. Every unmated girl in the pack had fantasized about being chosen by him. Naira had tried not to. She'd told herself it didn't matter who her mate turned out to be, that the bond itself was what counted, that she'd be happy with whoever fate decided to tie her to. But her heart still kicked hard against her ribs as Kieran walked past the other girls without looking at them. Past Elena, the healer's daughter with her copper hair and perfect smile. Past Sage, who'd been training as a warrior since she was 12. Past all of them. He stopped directly in front of Naira. The world seemed to hold its breath. For one perfect, crystalline moment, Naira felt it. The bond, like a golden thread spinning itself between them, wrapping around her heart and pulling tight. It felt like coming home, like finding something she hadn't known she'd lost. Then Kieran opened his mouth. "I, Kieran Thorne, son of Alpha Marcus, reject the bond that fate has offered." His voice was clear and cold, designed to carry to every corner of the gathering. "I reject Naira Vale as my mate." The words hit like a physical blow. Naira actually staggered backward, her hand coming up to clutch at her chest where something had just torn loose. The bond she'd felt forming, the golden thread that had been spinning itself between them, gone. Severed before it could fully take root. It didn't just disappear, it ripped, like having a part of her soul yanked out through her ribs. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The pain was so sharp and sudden that black spots danced across her vision. "No," she whispered, but her voice was lost in the shocked murmur rising from the crowd. Kieran's expression didn't change. He might as well have been reading from a script. "She is unworthy of a bond with the future Alpha. The pack has deliberated and agreed. Naira Vale is cursed," someone shouted from the crowd, a male voice, rough and angry. Others picked up the word, turning it into a chant. "Cursed, cursed, cursed." Naira's vision blurred. This couldn't be happening. Rejection was rare. It happened maybe once in a generation when a bond formed between wolves from different packs or when one half of a pair was already mated. But even then, it was done privately, with dignity. Not like this, not in front of everyone, with her unworthiness announced like a criminal sentence. The chanting grew louder. Someone threw something, a stone that clattered at her feet. Then another. Please. She didn't mean to speak. The word just fell out of her mouth, small and broken. I don't understand. What did I do wrong? Kieran finally looked at her then, really looked at her, and what she saw in his eyes was worse than anger or disgust. It was pity. He leaned in close, his voice dropping so only she could hear beneath the chaos of the crowd. You were born wrong, Nira, and we can't afford to have that kind of wrong in our bloodline. I'm sorry, but this is bigger than you and me. He turned and walked back to the inner circle. The crowd swallowed him up, but Nira could still feel hundreds of eyes on her, judging, afraid. She could hear the whispers now, spreading like wildfire through the gathering. I heard she can read minds. No, it's worse than that. She can make you tell the truth, even if you don't want to. My cousin said she made a warrior confess to stealing just by looking at him. Unnatural, that's what it is. Not proper wolf magic. Should have drowned her as a pup. Nira wanted to scream that it wasn't true, that she'd never hurt anyone, never used her abilities for anything except trying to understand a world that had always felt slightly out of focus, but her throat had closed up. She couldn't have defended herself if she'd wanted to. Elder Moira stepped forward again, raising her hands for silence. The crowd settled, but slowly, reluctantly. They wanted blood. Nira could feel it in the air like electricity before a storm. Nira Vale, Moira said, and her voice was heavy with something that might have been regret. You have been rejected by your destined mate. According to pack law, you have 3 choices. You may challenge the rejection and demand a trial by combat. You may accept a lesser bond with an unmated wolf of lower rank, or you may leave the pack lands voluntarily and never return. Nira's throat had closed up. She couldn't have spoken if she'd wanted to. Challenge Kieran? He was one of the best fighters in the pack. She'd seen him take down wolves twice his size in training. A trial by combat would be suicide. Accept a lesser bond? With who? She could see the unmated males in the crowd, and every single one of them was looking anywhere but at her. No one wanted to be tied to the cursed girl. However, Moira continued, and something shifted in her tone, something darker. The regret was gone, replaced by cold finality. Given the circumstances surrounding your heritage, the Council has decided that the first 2 options are not available to you. You will leave pack lands by sunrise. Any attempt to remain will be considered an act of aggression against the pack and will be dealt with accordingly. The crowd murmured approval. A few voices called out, "Good riddance," and "Should have done this years ago." Nira felt like she was drowning. Wait. She found her voice, though it came out hoarse and desperate. My parents. Can I at least say goodbye to my parents? Your parents have already agreed to this decision. Moira's words landed like hammer blows. They were consulted by the Council. They know what you are, Nira. They know what's best for the pack. What you are. Not who. What. As if she was a thing. A problem to be solved. Not their daughter. Not a person. The tears came then, hot and shameful. Nira pressed her hand to her mouth, trying to hold back the sob that wanted to tear out of her chest. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her completely broken. She would not. But she couldn't stay here. Couldn't stand in this circle with all these people staring at her like she was a monster. She turned and ran. The crowd parted to let her through. No one tried to stop her. Why would they? They were getting exactly what they wanted. She made it maybe 50 yards into the forest before hands grabbed her from behind. Strong hands that spun her around and slammed her against a tree hard enough to knock the air from her lungs. 2 of the pack warriors held her there, men she recognized, men she'd seen at pack gatherings her entire life, while a third approached, Dax, tall and scarred with graying hair and eyes that had always seemed kind when she was younger. He'd taught her how to track deer when she was 10 years old, had shown her which plants were safe to eat and which would make her sick. She'd thought he liked her. Sorry, girl, he said now, and he actually sounded like he meant it. There was genuine regret in his voice. But we can't have you running off into the forest and coming back later to cause trouble. Council's orders. I wouldn't. Naira tried to pull free, but the warriors held her firm. Dax, please, you know me. I'm not dangerous. That's not what the council says. He pulled something from his belt, a collar. Silver, gleaming in the moonlight, covered in etched runes that seemed to pulse with their own dark light. And I follow the council's orders, always have. No. Naira saw what he was about to do, and panic flooded through her. No, please, not silver. The collar snapped around her throat before she could finish the sentence. The pain was immediate and absolute. Silver burned werewolves, everyone knew that, but this was worse than any burn she'd ever experienced. It felt like the metal was searing straight through her skin, past muscle and bone, to wrap around something essential inside her. Her wolf. The collar locked her wolf away, trapped it behind a wall of agony. She screamed. The sound echoed through the forest, raw and animal. Her knees buckled. If the warriors hadn't been holding her up, she would have collapsed. Just until sunrise, Dax said, stepping back. He wouldn't meet her eyes anymore. Then we'll take it off and you can go wherever you want. But tonight, you stay in the holding cells, for everyone's safety. They dragged her through the forest. Naira's feet barely touched the ground. Every step sent fresh waves of pain radiating from the collar. She could feel her wolf screaming inside her mind, clawing at the silver barrier, unable to break through. The holding cells were built into a hillside on the far edge of pack territory. Stone rooms dug into the earth, originally designed to hold prisoners during times of war or wolves who'd broken pack law while they awaited trial. Naira had walked past this place 100 times and never imagined she'd see it from the inside. They threw her into the farthest cell, the one reserved for the most dangerous prisoners, and locked the door. Heavy iron, reinforced with more silver runes. Even without the collar, she wouldn't have been able to break through. The warriors left without another word. Naira collapsed on the stone floor. The silver collar continued to burn. Every breath felt like inhaling broken glass. Her throat was raw from screaming. She was alone in the dark for maybe an hour, maybe longer. Time felt strange and slippery, measured only by the rhythm of pain. Then she heard footsteps, soft, hesitant, someone who didn't want to be here. Her mother appeared at the barred window. Clara Vale, small and quiet, with Naira's same dark hair and gray eyes. The woman who'd braided Naira's hair that morning and told her she looked beautiful, who'd made her favorite breakfast even though Naira had been too nervous to eat much of it, who'd kissed her forehead and said, "Everything will be fine, sweetheart." "Mom?" Naira crawled toward the door, pressing herself against the bars. Her voice came out cracked and desperate. "Mom, please. You have to tell them this is a mistake. You have to make them understand I'm not dangerous. I would never hurt anyone. I'm your daughter." "It's not a mistake." Clara's voice was flat, empty, like someone had reached inside her and scooped out everything that made her a person, leaving only a shell. "We should have done this years ago, when the signs first appeared." The words were a slap. "What signs? I don't know what any of you are talking about. Don't lie to me." For the first time, emotion cracked through Clara's facade. Anger, and underneath it, fear. Deep, bone marrow fear. "I've seen what you can do, Naira. I've watched you since you were a child. The way you know things you shouldn't know. The way you can look at someone and see right through them. The way you made your teacher confess to losing that money when you were 7. The way you made your friend admit she'd been lying about her sister when you were 12. That's not normal wolf magic. That's something else. Something old and dangerous." Naira's blood went cold. She'd been so careful to hide it, to never use her abilities where anyone could see. Or so she'd thought, but her mother had been watching all this time. "I never hurt anyone with it," she whispered. "I just wanted to understand. People lie so much, Mom. All the time. About everything. I just wanted to know what was real. That's not the point." Clara stepped closer to the bars, close enough that Naira could see the tears on her cheeks, though her voice stayed steady. "The council researched your bloodline, Naira, after they noticed the signs. They went back generations. Your great-great-grandmother on my side, she wasn't pack-born. She came from somewhere else, somewhere old. The records say she was something they used to call a truth seeker." The word hung in the air between them. Naira had never heard it before, but somehow it felt right. like a name for something she'd always known she was, but had never had words for. The stories say truth seekers could see through any lie, Clara continued. Her hands gripped the bars, knuckles white. They could pull honesty out of people like drawing poison from a wound. They could bend reality itself if they knew the right words, the right questions. Make people confess to things they'd buried so deep they'd almost forgotten them themselves. The old packs used to hunt them down and kill them. Not because truth seekers were evil, but because they were too dangerous to control. Because a wolf who could force anyone to tell the truth could tear apart the whole pack structure, could expose every secret, every lie that kept the peace, could destroy everything. Nishti. I'm not going to destroy anything, Nira said, but even as the words left her mouth, she wasn't sure they were true, because there was a part of her, small and dark and growing, that wanted to destroy things, that wanted to burn down the pack that had done this to her. Clara must have seen something in her face. She stepped back from the bars. I love you, she said quietly. You need to know that. I love you more than anything in this world. That's why I'm telling you this instead of just letting you walk out there tomorrow with no idea what's waiting for you. Dread settled in Nira's stomach like a stone. What do you mean? The council didn't just decide to exile you. Claire's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. They sold you, Nira. There's a buyer, someone from the frontier territories who pays good money for wolves with special abilities, for wolves who can be useful. The world tilted. Nira grabbed the bars to keep from falling. What? He's a collector, a trader. He travels between the frontier settlements buying wolves that the packs don't want. Criminals, outcasts, anyone with abilities that might be valuable to the right buyer. Clara wiped at her eyes, but the tears kept coming. He'll be here at dawn to collect you. After that, what happens to you is out of our hands. The council said it's better this way. Better than just exiling you and hoping you don't join a rival pack or come back for revenge. This way, you'll be far away. Too far to ever threaten us. You're selling me. Nira couldn't quite process it. The words made sense individually, but not together. You're selling your daughter, like property. The council is selling you. Your father and I, we tried to argue against it. We did. But we were outvoted. And in the end, Clara's voice broke. In the end, maybe it's better this way. The frontier is harsh, but at least you'll be alive. If you stayed here, if you tried to use your power against the pack, they'd kill you, Nira. The council has already discussed it. This is the only way to keep you alive. I don't want to be alive like that, Nira said. Her voice came out cold, colder than she'd ever heard herself sound. I'd rather die than be someone's slave. Don't say that. Don't ever say that. Clara pressed her face against the bars, close enough that Nira could smell the lavender soap she always used. You're strong, baby. Stronger than you know. You'll survive this. And maybe someday, when enough time has passed and you've proven you're not a threat, maybe you can come home. Nira laughed. It came out bitter and sharp. You really believe that? You think they're ever going to let me come back? Mom, they're getting rid of me, forever. This isn't exile. It's erasure. Clara flinched like she'd been struck. I have to believe it. I have to believe I'll see you again. Otherwise, I don't know how I'm supposed to live with this. Then don't. Nira pulled away from the bars, away from her mother. Don't live with it. Let it eat you alive, because that's what you deserve for standing by and letting this happen. Nira, get out. Nira turned her back. I don't want to see you anymore. You're not my mother. My mother would have fought for me. She heard Clara sob, heard her whisper, I'm sorry, over and over like a prayer. Then footsteps retreating into the darkness. Nira stood in the center of the cell, shaking. The silver collar burned. Her chest ached where the bond had been ripped away. And underneath it all, something cold and hard was taking shape. Something that tasted like iron and rage and absolute certainty. They'd called her cursed, dangerous, a threat that needed to be eliminated. Fine. She'd show them what dangerous really looked like. But not today. Not when she was collared and caged and helpless. Today she'd survive. She'd do whatever it took to stay alive, to keep breathing, to make it through whatever came next. And then, when she was strong enough, when she'd learned to use the power they feared, she'd come back. Not for forgiveness, not for reconciliation, for revenge. The night stretched on forever. Nira didn't sleep, couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Kieran's face, heard him say, "You were born wrong," felt the bond tearing itself apart inside her chest. She spent the hours exploring the cell instead, running her hands along the stone walls, testing for weaknesses. There were none. The cell had been built to hold wolves much stronger than her, designed by people who'd spent centuries learning how to contain their own kind. The silver collar made it hard to think clearly. Pain had a way of eating up all the space in your head, leaving room for nothing else. But Naira forced herself to focus, to plan. She didn't know anything about the frontier territories except what everyone knew. They were wild, lawless, dangerous. The place where wolves went when they didn't fit anywhere else. The place where pack law meant nothing, and strength was the only currency that mattered. If she was going to survive there, she needed to be smart, needed to learn fast, needed to figure out how to use her abilities without getting herself killed. The truth seeker power. She'd always thought of it as just knowing when people lied. But according to her mother, it was more than that, pulling confessions, bending reality with the right words. Naira had never tried to do anything like that on purpose. It had always just happened. She'd ask a question and people would answer honestly even when they clearly didn't want to. She'd look at someone and suddenly know, with absolute certainty, whether they were telling the truth. But what if she could learn to control it? What if she could make it stronger? The thought was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. The first gray light of dawn was creeping through the barred window when she heard them coming. Multiple footsteps this time, heavier than her mother's, men. The cell door opened. Dax stood there with two other warriors Naira didn't recognize as well. Behind them, a fourth man, clearly not Pack. He was older, maybe 50, with weathered skin and cold blue eyes. He wore travel-stained clothes and carried himself with the easy confidence of someone who'd seen everything and been surprised by none of it. "This is her?" the stranger asked. "This is her." Dax wouldn't look at Naira. Naira Vale, 19 years old, truth seeker bloodline. Untrained. The stranger studied Naira for a long moment. She stared back, refusing to drop her eyes. Let him see that she wasn't broken. Not yet. "She's small," he said finally. "She's strong enough. And smart. Too smart, maybe." Dax shifted his weight. "You'll keep her collared?" "Until I'm sure she won't be trouble." The stranger pulled a length of silver chain from his belt. Lighter than the collar, but still silver. Still burning. "Let's get this done. I've got 3 more pickups before sunset." They removed the collar. The relief was so sudden and intense that Naira's knees buckled. But before she could even think about fighting, the chain was around her wrists. The pain flared again, different this time, sharper, more focused. "Move," the stranger said. Not cruel, not kind, just matter of fact. They led her out of the cell and through the forest. The pack had gathered again at the border. Not as many as last night, maybe 100 wolves, mostly warriors and council members, making sure she actually left, making sure the problem was solved. Naira scanned the crowd. Her father was there, standing near the back. He looked like he'd aged 10 years overnight. Their eyes met for just a second before he looked away. Her mother wasn't there at all. Kieran stood near the front with his father, Alpha Marcus. The Alpha was a massive man, gray-haired and scarred, with eyes that could cut through steel. He nodded once to the stranger. "Garrett, good to see you again." So that was the stranger's name? Garrett. "Alpha." Garrett inclined his head. "The payment?" Marcus handed over a leather pouch. It clinked. Coins. Naira had been sold for coins. She wondered how much, what her life was worth in whatever currency the frontier used. Probably not much. Garrett counted the money quickly, then nodded satisfaction. "Pleasure doing business. I'll be back through in 6 months if you have any other problems that need relocating." "We'll keep that in mind." A wagon waited at the tree line. It was built like a prison transport, iron bars forming a cage on wheels, heavy locks on the door. No windows except the barred opening at the back. Naira could see shapes moving inside. Other prisoners. Garrett pushed her toward it. "In." Naira climbed into the wagon. The door clanged shut behind her. Through the bars she could see the pack, her pack, the only family and home she'd ever known, watching as she was driven away. Kieran stood at the front of the crowd. He was staring at her with an expression she couldn't read. Guilt? Regret? Relief? Their eyes met one last time. Naira didn't mouth "I'm sorry" or "goodbye" or any of the things a normal person might say in this moment. Instead, she smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of someone making a promise. The smile of someone who just decided exactly what they were going to spend the rest of their life doing. Kieran's face went pale. He took a step back. Good. Let him be afraid. Let all of them be afraid. The wagon lurched forward. The forest began to slide past. And with every mile that separated her from Packlands, Naira felt the last threads of her old life snapping. She wasn't that scared girl anymore. The one who'd stood in the bonding circle hoping for acceptance. The one who'd hidden her power because she was afraid of what people would think. That girl was dead. What was being born in her place was something harder, something colder, something that wouldn't stop until it had burned down every structure that had allowed this to happen. 1. The wagon held 6 prisoners, including Naira. They were chained to the walls at intervals, close enough to touch if they reached but far enough apart that they couldn't easily coordinate an escape. The woman closest to Naira was maybe 30, with matted blonde hair and a face that might have been pretty once. She had scars on her wrists where silver chains had worn grooves into her skin. Old scars. This wasn't her first time in Garrett's wagon. First time? The woman asked after they'd been traveling for maybe an hour. Naira nodded. Thought so. You still have fight in your eyes. The woman shifted, trying to find a more comfortable position. The chains didn't give her much room. I'm Lena. Naira. What did you do to get sold? I was born wrong, apparently. Lena laughed, but there was no humor in it. Yeah, that'll do it. I was caught stealing food during a hard winter. Pack decided exile was too risky. I might join rivals or come back for revenge, so they sold me to Garrett instead. That was 4 years ago. 4 years. Naira tried to imagine surviving 4 years of this and couldn't. Where does he take us? Frontier settlements. There's a market there for wolves like us. Ones with special abilities, useful bloodlines, or just strong backs for labor. Lena leaned her head against the wagon wall. He sells us to whoever's buying. Sometimes it's packs that need workers. Sometimes it's wealthy wolves who want servants. Sometimes it's... She trailed off. Sometimes it's what? Better if you don't know yet. You'll find out soon enough. Naira wanted to press, but something in Lena's expression stopped her. Fear. Deep and old and carefully hidden. She looked at the other prisoners instead. 3 men, all of them bigger than her. All of them with the same defeated look, shoulders hunched, eyes downcast, the posture of people who'd given up. Don't look at them too long, Lena said quietly. Marcus, the big one in the corner, he gets mean when he's being stared at. And Thomas, the skinny one with the scar, he cries at night, and it sets everyone else off. What about the third one? Reed, he doesn't talk much. Been in the wagon longer than any of us. I think Garrett's having trouble selling him, which means he's either very valuable or completely worthless. Haven't figured out which yet. The wagon hit a rut, and everyone jolted. Naira's chains bit into her wrists. The silver burned. First piece of advice, Lena said. Don't try to escape. Garrett's been doing this for 20 years. He's never lost a prisoner. People who try to run either end up dead or wish they were. Noted. Second piece of advice. When we get to the market, don't show fear. The buyers can smell it. They'll use it against you. Whatever you're feeling inside, keep your face blank. Understand? Naira nodded. Third piece of advice. Lena's voice dropped even lower. You said you were born wrong. What does that mean? What can you do? This was the moment. Naira could lie. Say she didn't have any special abilities, that her pack had just been paranoid. That would be safer, smarter, but she was tired of hiding. I can tell when people are lying, she said, and I can make them tell the truth even when they don't want to. Lena's eyes widened. You're a truth seeker. You've heard of them? Stories, old ones. My grandmother used to talk about them. Lena looked at Naira with something like awe. I thought they were all dead. The packs hunted them down generations ago. Apparently they missed one. Well, Lena sat back. That explains why your pack sold you, and it means you're going to fetch a very high price at market. Frontier warlords would kill for a truth seeker, someone who could interrogate prisoners, root out traitors, force confessions. You're valuable, girl. Which means you're also in a lot of danger. More danger than I'm already in? Different danger. The kind where you don't get to choose your buyer. The kind where you end up belonging to someone who'll use you until there's nothing left. Nira absorbed this. So what do I do? You pray that whoever buys you at least has enough sense to keep you alive. Because dead, you're worthless. Alive, you're a tool, and tools get maintained. Lena closed her eyes. It's not much, but it's something. The wagon rolled on. Hours blurred together. Garrett stopped twice, once to water the horses, once to let the prisoners relieve themselves at the side of the road, chains still on, guards watching. Naira learned to hate the silver chains with a passion that surprised her. Every movement sent fresh pain radiating up her arms. But she didn't complain, didn't cry, didn't give Garrett or his guards any reason to think she was weak. When they stopped for the night, Garrett distributed food, dried meat and hard bread. Not much, but enough to keep them alive. That was all he cared about. Living merchandise was worth more than dead. Nira ate slowly, watching Garrett through the bars. He was setting up camp with his 3 guards, men who looked like they'd lived hard lives and expected to die harder deaths. They moved with military precision. These weren't random thugs, they were professionals. Don't even think about it, Lena murmured. I've seen people try. It never works. I'm not thinking about escape, Naira said, which was true. She was thinking about something else. She was thinking about how Garrett made his living, buying wolves from packs that wanted to get rid of them, selling them to buyers on the frontier. It was a business, which meant it had rules, patterns, predictability. And predictable things could be exploited. Not today. She wasn't strong enough, didn't know enough, didn't have enough information. But someday. She spent that night learning, asking Lena quiet questions about the frontier, about how the markets worked, about what kind of buyers showed up, about the power structures in the settlements. Lena seemed surprised that Naira wanted to know. Most new prisoners spent their first few days in shock, trying to process what had happened to them. But Nira had already processed it. She'd been rejected, betrayed, and sold. That was done. That was the past. The future was what mattered now. You're different, Lena said finally, after Naira had asked her 10th question about frontier politics. Most people in your situation would be crying or catatonic. You're taking notes. Crying won't help me survive. No, I suppose it won't. Lena studied her in the darkness. You're planning something. Is that a problem? Depends on what you're planning. If it's something stupid that's going to get us all killed, then yes. If it's something smart that might actually work, Lena smiled for the first time since they'd met. Then I want in. Naira smiled back. I'll let you know when I figure out what it is. That night, lying on the floor of the wagon with silver chains burning her wrists and her future uncertain, Nira made herself 3 promises. 1, she would survive. Whatever it took, whoever she had to become, she would survive. 2, she would learn. Everything she could about the frontier, about power, about how to use her abilities without getting herself killed. 3, she would remember. Every person who'd betrayed her, every face in that crowd, every word of condemnation. She would remember all of it. And when she was strong enough, when she'd climbed high enough, she'd make them remember too. Bad. The journey took 17 days. 17 days of the wagon rolling across rough roads. 17 days of pain from the silver chains. 17 days of rationed food and water, of sleeping on hard wood, of watching the landscape slowly change from forest to scrubland to something harder and more desolate. The frontier. Nira spent those 17 days learning everything Lena could teach her, about the settlements, lawless towns built around whatever resources could be extracted from the harsh land, about the warlords who controlled them, wolves strong enough or ruthless enough to carve out territories, about the currency of the frontier, strength, information, and loyalty, in that order. Money exists, Lena explained on the 5th day, but it's not worth as much as it is in Packlands. Out here, if you can't back up your wealth with force, someone just takes it from you. So the real power belongs to wolves who can fight, or wolves who know things others don't. And the buyers at the market? Depends. Some are looking for muscle, wolves who can fight their wars or guard their territory. Some are looking for specific skills, healers, trackers, builders. And some, Lena's expression darkened, some are looking for entertainment, or pretty faces to show off. You'll want to avoid those buyers if you can. How do I avoid them? You can't. Not really. Garrett decides where you stand in the market. He'll put you where you'll fetch the highest price. And for a truth seeker, Lena shook her head. You're going to draw every warlord in the territory. They'll bid against each other just for the prestige of owning you. Nira absorbed this, so I have no control over who buys me. None. That's the point. You're property now. Property doesn't get choices. But there had to be some way to influence the outcome. Some way to make herself more valuable to certain buyers and less valuable to others. If she could figure out what different buyers wanted, what they feared, she might be able to steer things. On the 10th day, Garrett stopped at a frontier outpost to pick up more prisoners. 2 women and a man, all of them looking half dead from whatever they'd been through before Garrett bought them. One of the women was maybe 16, barely more than a child. She had bruises on her arms and terror in her eyes. Nira watched Garrett lock her into the wagon and felt something cold settle in her stomach. This was what she'd become. Just another piece of cargo in a wagon full of broken wolves. The girl, her name was Sarah, Nira learned later, cried herself to sleep that first night. Don't get attached, Lena warned quietly. Sarah's not going to last long out here. She's too young, too scared. Someone will buy her for all the wrong reasons, and she'll be dead inside a year. That's not acceptable. It's reality. You can't save everyone, Nira. You can barely save yourself. But Nira watched Sarah anyway. Watched the way she flinched whenever Garrett came near. Watched the way she tried to make herself smaller, invisible. It reminded Nira of how she'd felt standing in that bonding circle. Small, powerless, waiting for someone else to decide her fate. She'd hated that feeling. On the 14th day, Marcus, the big prisoner who Lena had warned her about, tried to escape. He waited until Garrett and the guards were distracted setting up camp, then tried to break his chains by smashing them against the wagon bars. It didn't work. The chains held, and Garrett heard the noise. Nira watched through the bars as Garrett dragged Marcus out of the wagon, watched as the guards held him down, watched as Garrett pulled out a silver-laced whip. "Anyone else want to try something stupid?" Garrett called out. No one answered. The whipping lasted 5 minutes. Marcus screamed for most of it. When Garrett was done, he threw Marcus back into the wagon like a sack of meat. "Let that be a lesson," Garrett said calmly. "I need you alive. I don't need you whole." Marcus didn't move for 2 days after that. When he finally did, he was different, broken in a way he hadn't been before. Nira added Garrett to her list of people to remember. On the 17th day, they arrived at the settlement. Nira smelled it before she saw it, wood smoke and unwashed bodies and something else, something that smelled like desperation and violence. The wagon rolled down a wide dirt street. Buildings lined both sides, most of them looking like they'd been built in a hurry and never properly finished. Wolves moved through the streets with weapons visible on their hips. No one smiled. No one looked friendly. This was the frontier. Garrett stopped the wagon in front of a large stone building. It looked more permanent than the others, older, more solid. A woman emerged from the front entrance. She was tall and angular, with iron gray hair pulled into a severe bun. She looked at the wagon with the clinical detachment of someone evaluating livestock. "Garrett," her voice was crisp. "You're late. Had to take a detour around pack territories. They're getting more aggressive about checking cargo." Garrett climbed down from the driver's seat. "But I've got quality merchandise this time, including something special." The woman's eyebrows rose. "Oh?" Garrett walked to the back of the wagon and opened the door. "Out. All of you." They stumbled into the street. Nira's legs had gone numb from 17 days of limited movement. She nearly fell face first into the dirt. Lena caught her elbow. "Stay close," Lena murmured, "and remember what I said. No fear." The gray-haired woman circled them slowly, studying each prisoner in turn. When she got to Nira, she stopped. "This is the special one?" "Truth seeker," Garrett confirmed. "Untrained, sold by her birth pack. 19 years old, healthy, strong bloodline." The woman grabbed Nira's chin, forcing her head up. Nira met her eyes. They were cold and calculating. "Can you actually do it?" the woman asked. "Or is it just bloodline bragging?" Nira didn't answer immediately. This was it. The moment where she either stayed hidden or showed herself. The safe choice would be to downplay her abilities. seem less valuable, less dangerous. But Lena had said that truth seekers were worth a fortune on the frontier, and being valuable might be the only thing that kept her alive long enough to figure out her next move. So Naira reached for her power. She'd been suppressing it for 17 days, keeping it locked down tight. Now she let it rise. Not all the way, she didn't want to lose control, but enough. Enough to touch the woman's mind, enough to see past the cold facade. The woman was afraid, not of Naira specifically, of something bigger. She'd built this business, this whole operation, on the backs of broken wolves. But she was terrified that one day she'd buy someone who wasn't as broken as she thought. Someone who'd tear everything down. Naira smiled. "You're afraid," she said quietly. "You've built your whole life on wolves who've given up. But you're scared that one day you'll make a mistake, that you'll buy someone who still has fight left, someone who'll burn this place to the ground." The woman's face went pale. Her hand dropped from Naira's chin. "How did you? And you should be afraid." Naira kept her voice low, kept the power flowing through it like an undercurrent. "Because I am that someone. I'm the nightmare you've been waiting for. So if you're smart, you'll sell me to someone strong enough to control me, someone with resources and power. Because if I end up in the hands of someone weak..." She let the sentence hang. The woman took a step back, then another. She turned to Garrett. "Private sale, tomorrow. I already have a buyer who will pay premium for this one." "Who?" The woman's expression was grim. "Alpha Cain of the Shadow Crest Pack. He's been looking for a truth seeker for his court." Garrett whistled low. "He'll pay well. More than well. This one's worth her weight in gold to someone like him." The woman looked at Naira again, and this time there was something like respect in her eyes. "You're either very brave or very stupid, girl. I haven't decided which." "Does it matter?" Naira asked. "No, I suppose it doesn't." They were taken inside the building. The other prisoners were herded into a large holding area, a room with cells lining the walls, most of them already occupied. But Naira was separated from the group. They took her to a private cell, smaller, cleaner. No chains this time. Before they locked her in, Lena caught her eye. She mouthed 2 words. "Good luck." Naira nodded once. Then the door closed and she was alone. She sank down onto the narrow cot. Her wrists were raw from the silver chains. Her body ached from 17 days of rough travel. But her mind was racing. She'd just done something incredibly reckless. She'd revealed her power to the people who'd profit from it. She'd painted a massive target on her back. She'd guaranteed that she'd never have a chance at quiet anonymity. But she'd also done something else. She'd made them afraid. She'd taken control of her own sale. Instead of being auctioned off to whoever bid highest, she'd maneuvered herself into position to be bought by someone specific, someone powerful. Alpha Cain of the Shadow Crest Pack. She didn't know anything about him. Didn't know if he was cruel or kind, smart or stupid, trustworthy or treacherous. But he was an alpha, which meant he had resources, territory, information networks, all the things Naira would need if she was going to survive long enough to grow strong. And more importantly, alphas had enemies. Naira closed her eyes and let herself feel the full weight of everything that had happened. The rejection, the betrayal, the sale. 17 days in that wagon. She let herself feel all of it, and then she set it aside. Grief and rage were luxuries she couldn't afford right now. Right now, she needed to be cold, calculating. She needed to think 3 steps ahead. Tomorrow, she'd meet Alpha Cain. She'd figure out what he wanted, what he feared, how to make herself indispensable to him. And then she'd start climbing. It might take months, years, maybe decades. But she would climb. And when she reached the top, when she'd gathered enough power, enough knowledge, enough allies, she'd turn her attention back to the pack that had thrown her away. She'd make them regret every second of that bonding night. She'd make them wish they'd killed her when they had the chance. Because broken wolves were dangerous. But wolves who'd learned to weaponize their brokenness. Those were the ones who changed the world. The cell door opened at dawn. Naira had been awake for hours, watching gray light creep across the stone floor. She'd spent the night planning, mapping out scenarios, calculating risks, trying to predict what Alpha Cain would want from her. 2 guards entered. Not Garrett's men. These were different, larger, better armed, with the disciplined bearing of professional soldiers. They wore dark leather armor marked with a silver wolf's head. Shadow Crest Pack insignia. "On your feet," the taller one said. His voice was neutral. neither kind nor cruel. Nira stood. Her legs were steadier than yesterday. Food and a night without silver chains had helped. They didn't bind her wrists this time. That was either a good sign or a very bad one. Either they didn't consider her a threat, or they were confident enough in their own strength that restraints didn't matter. They led her through the building. Other prisoners watched from their cells as she passed. Sarah's young face pressed against the bars, eyes wide and frightened. Lena gave her a single nod that might have been encouragement or farewell. The gray-haired woman, Naira still didn't know her name, waited in the front room with a man who could only be Alpha Kane. He was younger than Nira expected, maybe 35, with dark hair going silver at the temples and eyes the color of winter ice. He wore simple clothes, black shirt, dark pants, boots, but carried himself with absolute authority, the kind that didn't need decoration or announcement. "This is her?" he asked. Naira Vale, Truthseeker bloodline, demonstrated ability yesterday. The woman gestured to Nira. As promised, Kane studied Nira for a long moment. She met his gaze without flinching. Let him see that she wasn't broken. Not yet. "Tell me something true," he said finally. It wasn't a request. It was a test. Nira reached for her power, carefully. She'd been reckless yesterday with the gray-haired woman. Today she needed to be precise. She touched the edge of Kane's mind, felt for the truth beneath his calm exterior. "You're not here because you need a truth seeker," she said quietly. "You're here because someone you trust has been lying to you, someone close, and you don't know who." Kane's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Surprise? Or maybe recognition. "Continue. You've built your power on loyalty, on wolves who follow you because they believe in you. But lately, things have been going wrong. Small things. A supply shipment that disappeared, a border patrol that failed to report in, information that leaked to rivals." Nira kept her voice steady, kept the power flowing through her words. "You think you have a traitor in your inner circle, but you can't root them out without proof. And you can't trust anyone enough to help you investigate." The room had gone very quiet. "How much of that is truth seeker ability?" Kane asked. "And how much is just good guessing? Does it matter?" He smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "No, I suppose it doesn't." He turned to the gray-haired woman. "We have a deal. The price we discussed. Already transferred to your account." Kane nodded once. Then he looked at Naira again. "You'll come with me. My guards will escort you to the estate. We'll discuss terms when we arrive." "Terms?" Naira repeated. "I'm not interested in owning slaves. I'm interested in useful wolves who know their value." Kane's tone was matter-of-fact. "You work for me, you get shelter, food, protection, and training. You betray me, you die. Simple enough?" It was more than Naira had expected, more than most prisoners got. But she could hear the unspoken weight beneath his words. Useful wolves who know their value, which meant he expected her to prove that value, constantly. "Simple enough," she agreed. The guards led her outside. A carriage waited in the street. Actual horses, actual wheels, not a prison wagon. Nira climbed in. One guard sat across from her, the other took the driver's seat next to Kane. They rolled through the settlement as the sun climbed higher. Nira watched through the window. The frontier looked even harsher in daylight. Wolves moved through the streets with weapons always visible, eyes always scanning. Two men were fighting in front of a tavern while a crowd placed bets. A woman dragged a crying child into a building that might have been a home or might have been something worse. This was the world she had to survive now. "First time on the frontier, Seiche?" the guard across from her asked. Nira nodded. "It's not as bad as it looks, once you figure out the rules." He was younger than the other guard, maybe 25 with a scar across his jaw. "I'm Beck, by the way. That's Matthias driving." "Naira." "I know. Everyone knows. Truthseeker in Shadowcrest territory? That's news." Beck leaned back against the seat. "Word of advice. Don't use your power on pack members unless the Alpha specifically asks. Wolves don't like having their minds poked at. Some of them will take it as an insult worth killing over." "Noted. And don't trust anyone. Not right away. There are wolves in the pack who'll smile to your face and put a knife in your back the second it benefits them." He paused. "Present company excluded, of course." "Of course," Nira said dryly. Beck grinned. You're going to do fine. Anyone brave enough to demonstrate their power to Maven, that's the gray-haired woman, has survival instincts. The journey took 3 hours. They left the settlement behind and traveled through scrubland that gradually gave way to forest. Darker trees than Naira was used to. Older. The kind that had seen centuries pass and didn't care about the wolves moving beneath their branches. The Shadowcrest estate appeared suddenly. One moment there was just forest, the next they were rolling through gates set into a high stone wall. The estate beyond was massive, a main house that looked more like a fortress, surrounded by smaller buildings that must have housed guards, servants, and various pack operations. Wolves were everywhere, training in the courtyard, standing guard on the walls, moving between buildings with purpose. This wasn't just an alpha's home, this was the heart of a military operation. Kane was waiting when the carriage stopped. He gestured for Naira to follow him. They entered the main house through heavy wooden doors. Inside it was cooler and quieter. Stone floors, tapestries on the walls, furniture that looked functional rather than decorative. They climbed a staircase to the second floor and down a hallway lined with closed doors. Kane stopped at one and pushed it open. Your room. There's a bath through that door. Clean clothes in the wardrobe. Dinner is at sunset in the main hall. You're expected to attend. Naira stepped inside. It was bigger than her entire house back in Packlands. A bed, a desk, a window that overlooked the courtyard. Simple, but clean. Thank you, she said. Don't thank me yet. You haven't earned this. Kane's expression was unreadable. Tomorrow we'll start determining exactly what you're capable of. For tonight, rest. You look like you need it. He left, closing the door behind him. Naira stood in the center of the room for a long moment. Then she walked to the window and looked out at the estate. Guards patrolling, wolves training, a whole complex system of power and hierarchy. And somewhere in this system, a traitor. Someone close to Kane who was betraying him. That was going to be her entry point, her way to make herself indispensable. She'd find the traitor, expose them, prove her value beyond question, and then she'd start building her own network, learning the frontier's power structures from the inside. The bath was heaven. Hot water, soap that actually smelled pleasant. Time to scrub away 17 days of grime. Naira soaked until her skin was pink and her fingers were pruned. The clothes in the wardrobe were simple. Pants, shirts, a jacket, but they fit reasonably well and were cleaner than anything she'd worn since leaving Packlands. She dressed carefully, checking her reflection in the small mirror above the desk. She looked different, thinner, harder. There was something in her eyes that hadn't been there 3 weeks ago. Something cold. Good. Dinner was exactly what Beck had said. Sunset in the main hall. Naira found her way downstairs following the sound of voices and the smell of food. The hall was enormous. Long tables filled with wolves eating and talking. At least 100 pack members, maybe more. At the far end of the room, a raised platform held a smaller table where Kane sat with what must have been his inner circle. Naira hesitated in his doorway. Every instinct screamed at her to turn around, to hide, to avoid all these eyes. Then Kane looked up and gestured her forward. She walked through the hall. Conversations died as she passed. Everyone was staring, judging, trying to figure out who she was and whether she was a threat. Let them stare. She climbed the steps to the platform. Kane indicated an empty seat to his right. Everyone, this is Naira Vale. She'll be working with me directly on security matters. His voice carried across the hall. Anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me, privately. No one spoke. Naira sat. The seat gave her a clear view of the entire hall. Smart positioning, she could observe everyone without being obvious about it. My inner circle, Kane said, gesturing to the others at the table. Sienna, my second in command. A woman in her 40s with sharp features and calculating eyes nodded once. Ronan, head of intelligence. A thin man with gray hair who didn't look up from his plate. Vera, master of arms. A muscular woman with scars on both hands who studied Naira with open suspicion. And you've met Beck and Matthias. They were all watching her, measuring her, trying to decide if she was useful or dangerous. Probably both, Naira thought. Dinner was served, roasted meat, vegetables, bread that was still warm. Naira ate slowly, listening to the conversations around her. Most of it was pack business, patrol schedules, supply requisitions, border disputes with neighboring territories. But underneath the practical talk, she could sense tension. Everyone at this table was on edge, because they all knew there was a traitor among them. "You're quiet," Sienna said halfway through the meal. "Most new wolves can't stop talking, trying to prove themselves." "I don't have anything to prove yet," Nira replied. Sienna's eyebrow rose. Smart answer, or careful one. She cut into her meat with precise movements. "How much did Kane tell you about why you're here?" "Enough. Then you know we have a problem, one that needs solving." Sienna's eyes were hard. "Question is whether you can actually help, or if you're just going to be another mouth to feed." "I guess we'll find out tomorrow." Ronan finally looked up from his plate. "The truth seeker ability. How does it work? Can you read minds? Force confessions?" This was dangerous territory. Nira had learned from Maven's reaction that revealing too much too fast made people afraid, but revealing too little made her seem useless. "I can tell when someone's lying," she said carefully, "and I can encourage honesty, but I can't read thoughts or control anyone's actions. It's not mind control, it's just persuasion." "Persuasion." Vera's voice was flat. "That's a polite word for it. Would you prefer I call it something else?" "I'd prefer you not use it on me at all." "Then don't lie to me and we won't have a problem." The table went silent. Vera stared at Nira with an expression that could have melted steel. Then, unexpectedly, she laughed. "I like this one. She's got spine." Vera raised her cup. "Welcome to Shadowcrest, girl. Try not to get killed in your first week." The tension broke. Conversation resumed. But Nira noticed that Sienna was still watching her with those calculating eyes, trying to figure her out. After dinner, Kane pulled Nira aside. "Walk with me." They left the hall and headed outside. The courtyard was quieter now, most wolves having retired for the night. Guards stood at their posts, but gave Kane and Nira wide berth. "Tomorrow I'll introduce you to the situation properly," Kane said. "But I want you to understand something first. The wolves at that table, they're good at what they do. Loyal, skilled. I trust them with my life. But one of them is betraying you. Maybe. Or maybe it's someone further down the chain. Someone they trust who they don't realize is compromised." Kane stopped walking and turned to face her. "The leaks started 3 months ago. Small things at first, then bigger. Last week, an entire supply convoy disappeared. 20 wolves dead. Supplies worth a fortune gone. Someone told our rivals exactly when and where to hit us. And you want me to find out who? I want you to find out who, how, and why. And I want you to do it without tipping them off that we're looking." Kane's expression was grim. "Because if the traitor realizes we're onto them, they'll either run or escalate, and I can't afford either option." Nira understood the weight he was placing on her. "What happens if I fail?" "Then more wolves die. My territory weakens. Rivals move in. Eventually Shadowcrest falls and I'm dead." He said it matter-of-factly, like he was discussing the weather. "No pressure." "What happens if I succeed?" "Then you prove your value. You earn a permanent place here. And you get access to resources most wolves would kill for." Kane started walking again. "I'm not a generous man, Nira, but I reward results. Find my traitor, and I'll make sure you have everything you need to survive on the frontier." Everything she needed to survive, that was the promise. But what Nira heard was everything she needed to eventually get revenge on the pack that had sold her. "I'll find them," she said. "I believe you will." Kane stopped at the base of the stairs leading back into the house. "One more thing. Don't trust anyone. Not Sienna, not Ronan, not Vera, not even Beck or Matthias. The traitor could be any of them, could be all of them. Until you know for certain, everyone is suspect." "Even you?" He smiled. It was cold. "Especially me. For all you know, this whole thing is a test. Maybe there is no traitor. Maybe I just want to see what you'll do with power." Nira studied him. Reached for her power, just a light touch, enough to sense the truth. He wasn't lying. There really was a traitor, and he really was desperate enough to trust a 19-year-old ex-pack wolf he'd bought from a frontier trader. "Get some sleep," Kane said. "Tomorrow we start." Nira climbed the stairs to her room. Once inside, she locked the door and sat on the bed, mind racing. She had maybe 3 months to find a traitor hidden somewhere in Shadowcrest's complex hierarchy. 3 months to prove she was worth keeping alive. 3 months to establish herself firmly enough that Kane couldn't afford to get rid of her. It should have been terrifying. Instead, Nira felt something she hadn't felt since the bonding night: purpose. She'd spent her whole life in packlands trying to hide what she was, trying to be small and invisible and safe. And where had that gotten her? Rejected. Sold. Cast out. But here on the frontier, hiding wasn't an option. Here, she had to be exactly what everyone feared: dangerous, useful, indispensable. She could do that. She would do that. Nira pulled out the desk chair and sat down, opened the top drawer and found paper and a pen. She started making lists. Everyone at the inner circle table. What she'd observed about them. What questions she needed answers to. Sienna, second in command, sharp, calculating, watching everyone. Possible traitor or possible ally. Ronan, intelligence chief. Quiet, observant, had access to all the information that had been leaked. Too obvious? Vera, master of arms. Blunt, suspicious. But suspicious of everyone or just of Nira? Beck and Matthias, guards, lower in the hierarchy. Would they have access to the kind of information that was being leaked? There were too many variables, too many unknowns. But Nira had one advantage. Nobody expected a broken X-Pac wolf to be capable of anything except survival. They'd underestimate her. Give her room to move because they didn't see her as a real threat yet. She'd use that. The next morning started before dawn. Someone knocked on her door, a servant with breakfast and a message. Alpha Kane requests your presence in his study. 1 hour. Nira ate quickly, dressed, and tried to prepare herself for whatever came next. The study was on the 3rd floor, tucked into a corner with windows overlooking the forest. Kane was already there, along with Ronan. Papers covered the desk, maps, reports, what looked like supply manifests. Good, you're on time, Kane gestured to the papers. These are all the incidents over the past 3 months. Ronan's compiled everything. I want you to review it. Look for patterns. Anything that might tell us who had access to this information. Nira moved closer to the desk. The first report was about a border patrol that had been ambushed. 4 wolves dead. No survivors to question. The second was about a supply shipment that had been raided. The third, a diplomatic meeting that had been leaked to rivals, allowing them to sabotage negotiations. She read through everything carefully. Ronan watched her with those sharp, analytical eyes. What do you see? He asked finally. 3 different types of incidents: military intelligence, supply chain information, political intelligence. Nira tapped each report. That suggests either 3 different leaks or one person with access to all 3 areas. Which is unlikely, Ronan said. We compartmentalize information specifically to prevent that kind of vulnerability. Unless the leak is someone high enough that compartmentalization doesn't apply. Nira looked at Kane. Who has access to all 3 areas? Me? Sienna. Ronan. Kane's expression was neutral. And technically, Vera, though military operations are her primary focus. So the inner circle, which meant the traitor was either someone at that table or someone they trusted enough to share information with. I need to talk to people, Nira said. The wolves who survived these incidents. Anyone who might have seen or heard something unusual. Most of them are dead, Ronan pointed out. That's part of the problem. The attacks have been thorough. Then I'll talk to the ones who aren't dead, and I'll need access to pack records, personnel files, anything that might show connections between wolves. Kane nodded. Ronan will set that up. You'll work from here. This study is secure, swept daily for listening devices, warded against most forms of surveillance. Anything you discover, you report directly to me. No one else. Not even Sienna? Especially not Sienna. Until we know who the traitor is, everyone is suspect. They spent the next 3 hours going through the records. Nira took notes, asked questions, started building a mental map of Shadow Crest's structure and where the weak points might be. By midday, her head was pounding. Too much information, too many possibilities. Take a break, Kane said. You're no good to me if you burn out in the first day. Go walk the grounds, get familiar with the territory. Beck will escort you. Beck was waiting outside the study. He grinned when he saw her. Surviving so far? Barely. Good. That's the frontier spirit. He led her downstairs and outside. Come on, I'll give you the tour. The estate was even bigger than it looked from her window. Besides the main house, there were barracks for the guards, a training complex, stables, an armory, and several buildings whose purpose Beck wouldn't specify. "Some things you'll learn when you need to know them," he said, "and some things you're better off not knowing at all." They ended up at the training yard. Wolves were sparring, hand to hand with weapons in wolf form. It was brutal and efficient. No wasted movement. Every strike meant to disable or kill. "You know how to fight?" Beck asked. "I can hold my own," which was an exaggeration. Naira had basic training from Packlands, but nothing like what she was watching now. "You'll need better than that if you want to survive here. I can put you on the training roster if you want. Vera runs a tight program, but she's the best." Naira watched two wolves circle each other, looking for openings. One feinted left, the other took the bait, and suddenly they were on the ground with the first wolf's teeth at the second's throat. "Yeah," Naira said. "Put me on the roster." That evening, Naira attended another dinner in the main hall. This time she paid more attention to the dynamics. Who sat where? Who talked to whom? Who avoided eye contact? Sienna was at the center of multiple conversations, coordinating pack business with the efficiency of someone who'd been doing it for years. Ronan sat quietly, observing. Vera was arm wrestling someone at a lower table, laughing when she won. They all looked normal, loyal, dedicated to Shadowcrest. One of them was a traitor. After dinner, Naira returned to her room and continued her analysis. She'd requested the personnel files and Ronan had delivered them, thick folders on every wolf in the inner circle and dozens more from the broader pack structure. She read until her eyes burned, looking for anything unusual, any connections that didn't make sense. And slowly, a pattern started to emerge. All three incidents, the Border Patrol ambush, the supply raid, the leaked diplomatic meeting, had one thing in common. They'd all been planned in meetings that included Sienna. But Sienna was Kane's second. The most loyal wolf in the pack, according to everyone Naira had talked to. She'd been with Kane since the beginning, had helped him build Shadowcrest from nothing. It was too obvious. Had to be a coincidence. Except Naira had learned the hard way that coincidences were usually just patterns people were too afraid to acknowledge. She needed more information. Needed to know if Sienna had any motive to betray Kane, any connections to rival packs, any weakness that could be exploited. The next morning, Naira cornered Beck after breakfast. "I need a favor." "Depends on the favor." "I need you to tell me everything you know about Sienna, and I need you to not tell anyone I asked." Beck's expression turned serious. "You think it's her?" "I don't know. That's why I'm asking." He was quiet for a moment, then he nodded. "Let's walk." They headed out to the training yard where their conversation would be lost in the sounds of combat. "Sienna's been with the Alpha for 12 years, Beck said quietly. "She was there when Shadowcrest was just him, and maybe 20 wolves trying to carve out territory. She's fought in every major battle, negotiated every major alliance. She's smart, ruthless when she needs to be, and completely dedicated to the pack. Everyone has a weak point. If she does, I've never seen it." Beck paused. "But about 6 months ago, something changed. She started taking trips, said she was visiting potential allies, building relationships with other frontier packs. Kane approved it, thought it was good strategy." 6 months ago, 3 months before the leak started. "Where did she go?" "Different places. I'd have to check the logs. But I remember one trip, she went to Iron Ridge territory. That's where our biggest rival is based. She said it was reconnaissance, learning their operations so we could counter them better. Or making a deal with them." "Did she bring back useful information?" "Yeah, that's the thing. Everything she reported checked out. It helped us win 2 skirmishes against Iron Ridge." Beck frowned. "If she's the traitor, she's playing a very long game, giving us wins to build trust so that when she betrays us, it hurts worse." That was exactly what a smart traitor would do. Build credibility. Make yourself indispensable. Then strike when it would cause maximum damage. "Don't tell anyone we had this conversation," Naira said. "Wasn't planning on it." Beck looked worried. "But Naira, if it is Sienna, and you accuse her without proof, she'll tear you apart. Literally, she's one of the best fighters in the pack." "Then I'll make sure I have proof." That night, Naira lay in bed staring at the ceiling, mind racing. She had a theory, but theories weren't enough. She needed evidence, needed to catch Sienna in the act, which meant she needed to set a trap, The next morning, Naira went to Kane's study. He was alone, reviewing reports. "I have an idea," she said. "But you're not going to like it. Tell me anyway." "We feed false information through the chain, something valuable enough that the traitor won't be able to resist passing it along. But we tell different versions to different people. Whichever version reaches your rivals, that tells us who the leak is." Kane considered this. "That's called a canary trap, old intelligence technique. Does it work?" "If executed properly. But it requires perfect compartmentalization. And if the traitor realizes what we're doing, they'll go to ground and we'll never find them." He leaned back in his chair. "What did you have in mind?" "A supply convoy. Tell Sienna it's coming from the north. Tell Ronan it's coming from the east. Tell Vera it's coming from the south. See which route gets ambushed. And if none of them do, then the traitor is someone else. Someone we haven't considered." Nira met his eyes. "But I don't think it is. I think it's Sienna." Kane's expression didn't change. Bold accusation. "I know. That's why I need the trap, to prove it." He was silent for a long time. Then, "Set it up. But Naira, if you're wrong, if you accuse my second-in-command without evidence and it destroys her trust in me, I'll make you wish Maven had sold you to someone else. Understood?" "Understood." They spent the next week preparing. Kane created 3 false convoy routes, elaborate lies, complete with forged manifests and schedules. He told Sienna the northern route, Ronan the eastern, Vera the southern. Naira watched, waited, used her power to observe reactions when each person received the information. Sienna accepted the assignment without question. Ronan asked clarifying questions but seemed satisfied with the answers. Vera grumbled about logistics but didn't seem suspicious. None of them appeared to be lying, but someone was. The convoys were scheduled to arrive on the same day. Kane positioned guards along all 3 routes, hidden and ready to respond if an attack came. Naira spent that day in Kane's study, watching the clock, waiting for word. It came at sunset. Beck burst through the door, breathing hard. "Northern route, ambushed 5 miles from the border. Iron Ridge wolves, 20 of them. They're tearing apart empty wagons looking for the supplies that aren't there." Nira's heart sank. Northern route. That was the information they'd given to Sienna. Kane's face was stone. "Capture them. All of them. I want to know who gave them this information." Beck nodded and ran. Kane turned to Naira. "You were right. I didn't want to be." "Neither did I." He stood. "Come on. We're going to confront her before she realizes the trap." They found Sienna in the war room reviewing maps with 2 other commanders. She looked up when Kane entered, smiled. "How's the convoy situation?" "Clear the room," Kane said. His voice was cold, absolute. The commanders left quickly, the door closed behind them. Sienna's smile faded. "What's wrong?" "Northern route was ambushed. Iron Ridge wolves, 20 of them." Kane moved closer. "Funny thing is, only one person knew the convoy was coming through the northern route." Understanding dawned on Sienna's face. "You set a trap." "I set a trap, and you walked right into it." "Kane, how long?" His voice cracked like a whip. "How long have you been selling us out to Iron Ridge?" Sienna's expression cycled through shock, denial, then something that looked almost like relief, like she was tired of pretending. 8 months, she said quietly. "Since they captured me during that reconnaissance mission. They didn't kill me. They turned me." Nira watched, her power flaring. Sienna was telling the truth, every word of it. "Why?" Kane's hands were shaking. "Why betray everything we built? Because they have my daughter." Sienna's voice broke. "She's been alive this whole time. I thought she died in the raids 10 years ago, but they had her. They showed me proof. Said if I didn't cooperate, they'd kill her. So I cooperated." The room went silent. Nira hadn't expected this. Hadn't expected the traitor to have a reason beyond greed or ambition. This was something worse, something human. "You should have told me," Kane said. "We could have..." "Could have what? Mounted a rescue? Risked the whole pack for one girl?" Sienna laughed bitterly. "You would have made the same calculation I did. The pack comes first, always. So I made my choice. I saved my daughter and damned everyone else." "Where is she?" "Iron Ridge stronghold, deep inside their territory. Guarded constantly. Sienna's eyes were wet. I'm sorry, Kane. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. Kane looked at Naira. Is she telling the truth? Nira nodded. Every word. He closed his eyes. When he opened them again, they were hard. You're under arrest. You'll be held until I decide what to do with you. If you cooperate fully, tell us everything you've leaked, every contact you have with Iron Ridge, I'll consider a rescue mission for your daughter. And if I don't cooperate, then you both die. Your choice. Guards came. Sienna didn't resist. They led her away. When they were alone, Kane turned to Naira. You did good work. I don't feel good about it. You're not supposed to. That's how you know you're still human. He moved to the window, staring out at the darkening sky. She was my second, my friend. I trusted her with everything, and she betrayed me to save her daughter. How am I supposed to? He trailed off. Nira didn't have an answer, because she understood both sides, understood why Sienna had done it, understood why Kane felt destroyed. Loyalty was supposed to be absolute, but when it came down to it, everyone had a breaking point, even her. What happens now? Nira asked. Now we extract every piece of information from her. Then we decide if her daughter is worth the risk of a rescue mission. Kane's voice was hollow. And then I have to figure out who I can actually trust. Because if Sienna could betray me, anyone can. He looked at Naira then, really looked at her. You proved yourself today. You found the traitor when no one else could. That means you're valuable, dangerously valuable. Is that a threat? It's a fact. Kane moved closer. You're good at what you do, Naira. Too good. Which means you're either going to be my greatest asset or my worst enemy. Right now, I'm betting on asset. Don't make me regret that bet. He left. Nira stood alone in the war room, surrounded by maps of territory she didn't understand and power structures she was only beginning to comprehend. She'd done what Kane asked, found the traitor, proved her worth, but she'd also just destroyed the second most powerful wolf in Shadowcrest, and now everyone knew what she was capable of. The next few days, Naira felt the shift. Wolves who'd ignored her before now watched her carefully. Conversations died when she entered rooms. People were afraid of her. Good. Fear was better than contempt. Fear meant they'd think twice before trying to use her. Vera approached her after training one morning. You took down Sienna. I exposed a traitor. Same thing from where I'm standing. Vera crossed her arms. You know half the pack thinks you're lying, that you framed her to make yourself look good? And what do you think? I think you're smart enough to do exactly that if it benefited you. Vera's expression was unreadable. But I also think Kane wouldn't have arrested his own second without being absolutely certain. So either you're telling the truth or you're the best manipulator I've ever met. Can I be both? Vera laughed. Yeah, you probably can. She jerked her head toward the training yard. Come on, if you're going to survive with a target on your back, you need to be able to fight better than you do now. The training was brutal. Vera didn't hold back, didn't make allowances for Nira being smaller or newer. She threw Nira to the ground over and over, correcting her stance, her balance, her instincts. You fight like a pack wolf, Vera said, after knocking Nira down for the 10th time. All proper technique and following rules. That doesn't work on the frontier. Here, there are no rules. You do whatever it takes to win, eye gouging, throat tearing, playing dead then striking when they let their guard down. Whatever. Works. Nira wiped blood from her split lip. Teach me, Vera smiled. Now you're talking. They trained every morning after that. Nira learned to fight dirty, learned to use her size as an advantage, get close, get low, target vulnerable spots, learn to read opponents and find their weaknesses. She also continued working with Kane. Sienna had given them names, Iron Ridge contacts, leaked information, the structure of their spy network. Kane used that information to strike back. Small operations at first, cutting off supply lines, exposing Iron Ridge spies in other packs. Nira helped with the interrogations, used her power to verify information, became essential to the intelligence operation. 2 months after Sienna's arrest, Kane called Naira to his study. I've made a decision about Sienna's daughter, he said. We're going to attempt a rescue. It's risky. It'll cost lives. But I'm not leaving a child in Iron Ridge's hands if there's any chance of getting her out. When? 3 weeks. We're still planning the operation. He paused. And you're coming with us. I'm not a soldier. No. But you're a truth seeker. If we manage to get into the stronghold, I need you to verify that the girl is actually there, that this isn't a trap, that Sienna didn't lie about any of it. Kane's expression was grim. This mission is too important to go in blind. Naira understood what he wasn't saying. If the mission failed, if it was a trap, Shadowcrest would be weakened. Kane could lose his position. The whole pack could fall. He was trusting her with everything. I'll be ready, she said. The next 3 weeks were a blur. More training with Vera, strategy sessions with Ronan, learning to move silently, to blend into shadows, to think like a soldier. Naira had never planned to become a warrior, but the frontier didn't care about plans. It cared about survival. The night before the mission, she couldn't sleep. She stood at her window looking out at the estate. 3 months ago, she'd been in that wagon, broken and sold. Now she was about to infiltrate an enemy stronghold. The transformation should have felt empowering. Instead, it just felt necessary. A knock at her door. Beck stood in the hallway. Couldn't sleep either? Too much adrenaline. Yeah, first mission's always like that. He leaned against the doorframe. Just remember, stay close to your unit. Do what you're told. And if things go bad, run. Don't try to be a hero. Noted. He started to leave, then stopped. Naira, for what it's worth, I'm glad you're here. You're different from most frontier wolves. You still have, I don't know, humanity, I guess. Don't lose that. After he left, Naira stood in the center of her room. Humanity. Was that what it was? Or was it just the last remnant of who she used to be, slowly burning away? She didn't know anymore. All she knew was that tomorrow she'd step onto a battlefield, and whatever happened there would determine not just whether Sienna's daughter lived or died, but whether Naira had truly become the weapon everyone expected her to be. She closed her eyes and reached for her power. It responded instantly now. 3 months of practice had made it stronger, sharper, more precise. She could feel truth and lies like flavors on her tongue, could pull confessions from people with just a few carefully chosen words, could bend conversations, shift perspectives, make people doubt their own certainty. It should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like coming home. Tomorrow she'd use this power in combat, would weaponize it fully for the first time, and maybe afterward she'd finally understand what she was becoming. Monster or savior, weapon or warrior. The girl who'd been rejected and sold, or something entirely new. The answer, Naira discovered at dawn, was both. The raid team assembled in the courtyard before sunrise. 30 wolves, all of them seasoned fighters who'd survived more frontier battles than Naira had years of life. She stood among them in borrowed armor that didn't quite fit, trying not to look as terrified as she felt. Kane addressed them from the steps. Iron Ridge Stronghold is 3 days hard travel. We go in fast, extract the target, get out faster. No heroics. No unnecessary risks. We're not there to start a war, just to take back what's ours. Vera moved through the ranks, checking weapons and gear. When she reached Naira, she paused. You armed? Naira showed her the knife strapped to her thigh. It was small, practical. The kind of weapon someone used when they had no business being on a battlefield. That's not going to save you if things go sideways. Vera pulled a second blade from her own belt and handed it over. This one's weighted for throwing. Aim for the throat or eyes. Anywhere else is a waste. I'm not supposed to be fighting, just verifying. Plans change. Be ready. Vera moved on. They left as the sun broke over the tree line. The journey was exactly as brutal as promised. Rough terrain, minimal rest, constant vigilance. Naira learned to move silently through underbrush, to read hand signals in the dark, to ignore the burning in her legs and the weight of the pack on her shoulders. Beck stayed close to her. You're doing good. Better than most newcomers. I don't feel like I'm doing good. That's because you're smart enough to be scared. The ones who aren't scared are the ones who get killed first. On the second night, they made camp in a ravine. No fire. Cold rations. Guards posted in shifts. Naira sat with her back against a rock, too wired to sleep. Ronan materialized out of the darkness and sat beside her. Nervous? Terrified. Good. Fear keeps you sharp. He was quiet for a moment. You know this could be a trap. Sienna could have lied about her daughter, could have fed us false information to lure Kane into enemy territory. She wasn't lying. I'd have known. Your power's not infallible. People believe their own lies sometimes. Makes them read as truth even when they're not. Ronan studied her in the dim starlight. I'm just saying, be ready for this to go wrong. The third day, they reached the border of Iron Ridge territory. The forest changed. Older trees, darker shadows. The air tasted different, hostile. They waited until full dark before approaching the stronghold. It was built into the side of a mountain. Stone walls, guard towers, a single heavily fortified gate. Impossible to assault directly, which was why they weren't going through the gate. Ronan had obtained plans from one of Sienna's contacts. There was a drainage tunnel on the east side, barely wide enough for a wolf to crawl through. It led to the lower levels where prisoners were kept. If the plans were accurate, if the contact had been honest, if Sienna's daughter was actually there. Too many ifs. Kane gathered the team. Ronan leads the entry team, 6 wolves through the tunnel. Find the girl, verify identity, extract. The rest of us hold the perimeter and provide cover for the exit. Questions? No one spoke. Naira. Kane looked at her directly. You're with Ronan's team. Your job is to verify the target. Once you've confirmed it's actually Sienna's daughter, you signal and we move. Clear? Clear. Vera grabbed Naira's arm. Don't do anything stupid in there. If it's a trap, you run. Don't try to be a hero. Second person to tell her that. Nira was starting to think heroism wasn't valued on the frontier. They moved into position. The drainage tunnel was exactly where the plan said it would be. A dark opening barely 3 feet across, water trickling out of it. It smelled like rot and worse things. Ronan went first, then Beck, then Naira, and 3 other wolves whose names she'd learned but couldn't remember through the adrenaline haze. The tunnel was worse than anything Nira had imagined, tight enough that she had to crawl on her belly, water soaking through her clothes, stones scraping her elbows and knees. The wolf in front of her kept kicking water back into her face. She couldn't see anything except the occasional glimmer of light from Ronan's shielded lantern up ahead. Claustrophobia clawed at her throat. She forced it down. Keep moving. Don't think about the tons of stone above you. Don't think about what happens if the tunnel collapses. After what felt like hours but was probably 20 minutes, the tunnel opened into a larger space. A chamber carved from rock, maybe 10 feet across. 3 doors led off in different directions. Ronan consulted the plans. Cells should be through the middle door. Stay tight, stay quiet. They moved through corridors that twisted like a maze. Twice they heard footsteps and pressed themselves into alcoves, barely breathing. Guards passed within feet of them, oblivious. Finally, Ronan stopped at a heavy wooden door. He tested it, locked. Beck pulled out lockpicks and went to work. The sound of metal scraping metal seemed impossibly loud in the silence. Naira's heart hammered so hard she thought everyone must be able to hear it. The lock clicked. The door swung open. Inside was a cell block. 6 cells, iron bars, torches burning in brackets on the walls. 5 cells were empty. In the 6th, a girl sat on a stone bench. She was maybe 12 years old, dark hair like Sienna's, same sharp features, but skinnier, bruised. She looked up when they entered and her eyes went wide. Don't scream, Ronan whispered. We're here to help. Sienna sent us. The girl's expression cycled through disbelief, hope, terror. My mother? Nira moved closer to the bars. She reached for her power, touching the girl's mind gently, looking for deception, looking for any sign this was a plant, a trap, anything other than what it appeared to be. All she felt was fear and desperate hope. This was Sienna's daughter, actually her, not a trick. It's her, Nira said quietly. She's real. Beck went to work on the cell lock. It took longer than the door. Better quality, more complex mechanism. Every second felt like an eternity. Footsteps echoed down the corridor. Multiple sets, moving fast. We've got company, one of the other wolves hissed. The lock clicked. Beck yanked the cell door open. Move! They ran. The girl stumbled, weak from captivity, not used to moving fast. And Beck scooped her up without breaking stride. Behind them, shouts erupted. The alarm had been raised. The corridor erupted into chaos. Guards poured in from side passages. Ronan's team fought their way through, quick, brutal, efficient. Nira stayed in the middle of the formation, knife in hand, trying not to get in the way. A guard broke through the line and came straight at her. No time to think. Nira threw the weighted knife exactly like Vera had taught her. It caught the guard in the throat. He went down choking. First kill. No time to process it. Keep moving. They reached the drainage tunnel. Beck went first with the girl, then the other wolves. Nira was almost through when she heard Ronan curse behind her. More guards, go, I'll hold them off. Not a chance. Nira grabbed his arm and pulled. We leave together or not at all. They scrambled into the tunnel as shouts and footsteps closed in. The space was too tight to fight properly. The guards would just follow them through and kill them in the dark. Nira made a decision. She reached for her power. Not the gentle touch she'd been using. Everything, every ounce of it. She turned to face the guards crowding the tunnel entrance and spoke with power flooding every syllable. Stop. The guards froze. Not because they wanted to, because her power had wrapped around their minds and made them. Turn around. Walk back to your posts. Forget you saw us. They turned. Walked away like puppets with cut strings. Nira sagged against the tunnel wall. That had taken more power than she'd ever used before. Her head throbbed. Her vision swam. Move, Ronan hissed. That won't hold them long. They crawled through the tunnel. Nira's arms shook with exhaustion. Behind them, she could hear the guards starting to snap out of it. Confused shouts, the alarm spreading. They burst out of the tunnel into cold night air. The rest of the team was there, weapons ready. Go, Kane shouted. Now! They ran. The stronghold erupted behind them, lights blazing, horns blowing, the sound of wolves mobilizing for pursuit. But Shadowcrest's team had a head start and knew the terrain. They scattered into the forest, regrouping at designated points, moving too fast for the pursuit to coordinate properly. By dawn, they'd put 20 miles between themselves and Iron Ridge territory. They stopped only long enough for Kane to check on the girl. She was unconscious. Exhaustion or shock, or both. But she was breathing, alive. You did it, Kane said to Nira. You got her out. Ronan got her out. I just helped. You held off guards with your power, gave us time to escape. Kane's expression was unreadable. That's not just helping, that's combat magic. I didn't know truth seekers could do that. Neither had Nira. But apparently when you were desperate enough, terrified enough, you found reserves you didn't know existed. They made it back to Shadowcrest without further incident. The girl, her name was Mira, they learned once she woke up, was reunited with Sienna in her cell. Nira watched through the barred window as mother and daughter clung to each other, both sobbing. I'm still exiling her, Kane said quietly beside Nira. She betrayed the pack. I can't let that stand. But she can take Mira with her, start over somewhere else. That's more mercy than most alphas would show. Maybe. Or maybe I'm just tired of losing people. Kane turned away from the cell. You proved yourself on this mission. Saved lives. Demonstrated abilities I didn't know you had. That makes you valuable. Dangerously valuable? Exactly. He studied her. Which brings me to a proposition. I want you to take Sienna's place. Nira's stomach dropped. What? Not as second in command. You're too young, too new for that. But as my official advisor, head of intelligence operations. The wolf who roots out threats before they destroy us. Kane's voice was matter-of-fact. You'd have authority, resources, protection, everything you need to build real power here. It was more than Nira had dared hope for. 3 months ago, she'd been cargo in a wagon. Now she was being offered a position of actual authority. What's the catch? The catch is that everyone will hate you for it. They already fear you. Now they'll resent you too. You'll have to watch your back constantly. Trust no one. Live with the knowledge that half the pack would celebrate your death. Kane's eyes were cold. But you'll survive. And you'll have the tools to eventually get whatever revenge you're planning. So he'd figured that out. Nira shouldn't have been surprised. I accept. Good. We'll announce it tonight at dinner. Kane started to walk away, then paused. One more thing. That power you used in the tunnel, forcing guards to obey you, don't use it on pack members. Ever. I don't care how justified it seems. The second my wolves think you can control their minds, they'll turn on you, and I won't be able to stop them. The announcement at dinner went exactly as badly as expected. Shocked silence when Kane revealed Nira's new position. Then angry muttering. Vera looked disgusted. Ronan looked calculating. The other wolves looked afraid. "This is insane," Vera said, loud enough for the whole hall to hear. "She's been here 3 months. She's not even pack-born. And you're putting her in charge of intelligence?" "I'm putting her in charge of finding traitors," Kane corrected. "Something she's already proven she can do better than anyone else here. Anyone have a problem with that?" No one spoke, but the resentment was thick enough to choke on. That night, someone tried to kill Naira. She woke to the sound of her window opening. A shadow slipped into her room. She rolled off the bed just as a knife thudded into her pillow. Training kicked in. Naira grabbed the weighted knife from her nightstand and threw it in one smooth motion, caught the assassin in the shoulder. Not fatal, but enough to make them stumble. She used the power. "Stop. Tell me who sent you." The assassin froze, fought against the compulsion. Whoever they were, they had strong will, but not strong enough. "Marcus, from the Northern Unit, said you're dangerous, said the pack would be better without you." "How much did he pay you?"
50 silver.
50 silver. That's what her life was worth to Marcus. Nira almost laughed. Guards burst in, drawn by the noise. They saw the assassin, saw the knife in Nira's pillow, and dragged the would-be killer away. Kane arrived minutes later. "You all right?" "I've had better nights. Marcus will be dealt with, and I'll post guards outside your door from now on." "That won't stop people from trying." "No, but it'll slow them down." Kane looked at the knife still embedded in her pillow. "Welcome to power, Naira. Hope it's everything you wanted." The next months were a brutal education. Naira learned to navigate Shadowcrest's complex politics, learned who could be bribed, who could be threatened, who was genuinely loyal and who was just pretending. She built her own network of informants, wolves who owed her favors, wolves who feared her abilities, wolves who saw her as a path to their own advancement. She uncovered 3 more potential traitors, rooted out a smuggling operation that had been bleeding the pack's resources, exposed a conspiracy by wolves in the Southern Territories to assassinate Kane during a diplomatic meeting. Every success made her more valuable and more hated. 6 months after taking the position, Naira was walking through the market district when she overheard 2 wolves talking. Unnatural. What she can do. Should have sold her to someone else. Won't last. Someone will get her eventually. She was used to it by now. Let them talk. Let them fear her. As long as they feared her, they wouldn't try anything. But then she heard something that made her stop. Heard she was rejected by her birth pack. Mate bond severed at a bonding ceremony. Her blood went cold. Pathetic, really. No wonder they got rid of her. Naira's power flared before she could stop it. She turned to face the wolves. "What did you just say?" They went pale. "Nothing. We didn't mean... You said I was rejected. How do you know about that?" Silence. Naira stepped closer, let the power flood her voice. "Answer me. How do you know?" "There's a traitor," one of them stammered. "Comes through sometimes. He spreads news from pack territories. Said there was a bonding ceremony where the alpha's son rejected his mate. Said she was sold to the frontier. We just put it together." A traitor, spreading news. Naira's mind raced. If word of her rejection was spreading, then her birth pack knew where she'd ended up, knew she'd survived, might even know she'd risen to a position of power. That changed everything. She thanked the wolves, coldly, and walked back to the estate. She needed to talk to Kane. She found him in his study with a visitor, a wolf she didn't recognize, middle-aged, well-dressed, with the bearing of someone used to authority. "Naira?" Kane gestured her in. "This is Alpha Darius from the Redstone Pack. He's here to discuss an alliance." Naira nodded politely. Alliances were Kane's business, not hers. But Darius was staring at her. "You're the truth seeker." "I am." "Interesting. I've heard about you. The stories don't do you justice." He turned back to Kane. "Actually, she's part of why I'm here. I have a proposition that involves both of you." Kane raised an eyebrow. "Go on." "There's a summit happening in 3 weeks. All the major frontier alphas. We're trying to form a coalition, strengthen numbers, mutual defense packs, that kind of thing. But the problem is trust. None of us trust each other enough to make it work." Darius smiled. That's where you come in. I want to propose that Shadow Crest's Truth Seeker acts as a neutral arbiter. She verifies that each alpha is negotiating in good faith, exposes any hidden agendas, makes the whole thing possible. Naira saw the trap immediately. You want me to use my power on multiple alphas, all of whom will resent being psychically interrogated. They'll accept it because it's the only way the summit works, and they'll pay handsomely for the service. Darius named a figure that made even Kane's eyes widen. Split between you and Shadowcrest, of course. And if I refuse? Then the summit fails. The frontier stays fractured. Stronger packs prey on weaker ones. Everyone loses. Darius leaned forward. But if you do this, if you pull it off, you'll have every major alpha in your debt. That's power, girl. Real power. Kane looked at Naira. Your call. It was a risk. A huge one. Using her power on that many powerful wolves could backfire spectacularly. But the potential reward, I'll do it, Naira said, under one condition. I want information. What kind of information? About pack territories, specifically about the northern packs. I want to know everything that's happening there, every piece of news, every rumor, every shift in power. Darius studied her. Looking for something specific? Just staying informed. He didn't believe her, but he nodded anyway. Deal. After Darius left, Kane turned to Naira. This is about your birth pack, isn't it? No point lying. Yes. What are you planning? I don't know yet, but I need to know what's happening there. Whether they've forgotten about me, or if I'm still a threat in their minds. Kane was quiet for a moment. Whatever you're planning, be careful. Revenge has a way of consuming people. I've seen it happen. Noted. The summit was held in neutral territory, an old fortress that had been converted into a meeting hall. 7 alphas attended, each bringing their own guards and advisors. The tension was immediate and obvious. These were wolves who'd been rivals, enemies, sometimes outright at war with each other. Nira's job was to make them trust each other long enough to forge an alliance. The first day was a disaster. Every alpha came with hidden agendas. Every proposal came with strings attached. By sunset, 3 different alphas had nearly come to blows. Darius pulled Naira aside. This is why we need you. Can you do it? I can make them tell the truth. I can't make them like each other. Truth is enough. Start tomorrow. First session. The second day, Naira stood before 7 of the most powerful wolves on the frontier and announced what she was going to do. I'm going to ask each of you 3 questions. You're going to answer honestly. Not because you want to, but because I'm going to make sure you can't lie. If you have a problem with that, leave now. No one left. They couldn't afford to. Nira started with Darius. Are you negotiating this alliance in good faith, or do you have ulterior motives? She felt him resist, felt his mind push back against her power, but she'd gotten stronger over the past months. She pushed harder. Good faith, Darius said through gritted teeth. I need this alliance. My territory can't stand alone much longer. Truth. Naira moved to the next alpha. Do you plan to honor whatever agreements we make here, or are you already planning betrayals? I'll honor them, as long as they benefit me. Honest, at least. She went through all 7, pulled out secrets, exposed hidden agendas, forced honesty from wolves who'd built their power on deception. By the end of the day, she'd made enemies of half the room, but she'd also given them something they'd never had before. Certainty. They knew where each alpha stood, knew who could be trusted and who needed watching. The alliance was forged that night. Shaky, conditional, but real. And Naira had just become the most valuable and most hated wolf on the frontier. 3 days after the summit, Naira received the information she'd requested. Reports from the northern territories. News about her birth pack. She read through it all in her room, hands shaking. The pack was struggling. Without her as a scapegoat, internal conflicts had surfaced. Kieran had taken over as alpha after his father died. Natural causes, the report said, but Nira wondered. He was leading the pack in a different direction, trying to modernize. Some wolves supported him, many didn't. And there was one more piece of information. Kieran had never taken another mate. The bond he'd rejected was apparently still affecting him. He was weaker than he should be. Vulnerable. Naira stared at that last line for a long time. She could use this, could exploit Kieran's weakness, could reach out through whatever remained of that severed bond and destroy him from the inside. Or she could let it go. Focus on building her power here rather than seeking revenge there. The decision should have been easy. But late that night, as Naira lay in bed staring at the ceiling, she realized something that terrified her. She didn't want revenge anymore. She'd built a life here, had power, respect, well, fear, which was close enough. She'd proven herself, survived, become exactly what she'd promised herself she'd become. Going back for revenge would risk all of that. For what? To punish people who'd already paid a price. It felt hollow. But if she didn't get revenge, then what had all of this been for? The question haunted her for days, until the morning she was summoned to Kane's study and found him with two visitors she hadn't expected, wolves from her birth pack. She recognized them, Border Patrol, lower-ranking members. They looked uncomfortable in Shadow Crest's estate. "They have a message," Kane said. His expression was carefully neutral. "From Alpha Kieran." One of the wolves stepped forward. "Alpha Kieran requests a meeting. He wishes to speak with you about reconciliation." Naira's world tilted. "What?" "The pack has discussed recent events. There's been reconsideration of your exile. Alpha Kieran believes a mistake was made. He wants to discuss the possibility of you returning home." Home. The word hit like a physical blow. After everything, after they'd rejected her, sold her, tried to erase her, now they wanted her back? Why? Nira's voice came out cold, harder than she'd intended. The messenger hesitated. "The pack is struggling. We've lost direction. And Alpha Kieran, he's not well. The rejected bond is affecting him. He believes that if you return, if the bond can be restored, it might heal both of you." So that was it. They didn't want her. They needed her. "And if I refuse?" Then we respect your decision and leave you in peace." Naira looked at Kane. He was watching her carefully. "Your choice," he said quietly. "Stay here or go back. I won't stop you either way." This was it. The moment she'd been unconsciously building toward since the night she'd been thrown into that wagon. She could go back. Could return to packed lands with her head held high. Could make Kieran and everyone else acknowledge what they'd lost when they cast her out. Or she could stay. Could continue building power on the frontier. Could become something bigger than a rejected mate looking for vindication. The choice should have been obvious. But standing there, looking at wolves from her birth pack, Nira felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in months. She felt homesick, not for the pack that had betrayed her, but for the person she'd been before all of this started. The girl who'd believed in mate bonds and pack loyalty, and all the things that had turned out to be lies. She missed that innocence, that hope. "I need time to think," she said finally. The messengers nodded and left. Kane poured 2 glasses of whiskey and handed her one. "That was unexpected. That's one word for it." "What are you going to do?" Nira drank. The whiskey burned going down. "I don't know. Part of me wants to go back just to throw their offer in their faces. Show them exactly what they lost. And the other part? The other part thinks that would be giving them exactly what they want. They'd get me back, get the bond restored, solve their problems. Where's the revenge in that? Maybe revenge isn't the point anymore." Nira looked at him sharply. "What do you mean? You've built something here. Real power, real skills. You're not that broken girl they sold anymore. Going back would prove you've healed, but staying here proves you've moved beyond needing to prove anything at all." Kane set down his glass. "The question isn't what hurts them more. It's what serves you better." He was right. Naira hated that he was right. She spent the next week in an agony of indecision, barely slept, couldn't focus on work. The question consumed her. Finally, she went to the one person she thought might understand. Vera was in the training yard as usual. Naira waited until she finished beating a younger wolf into submission, then approached. "I need advice." Vera wiped sweat from her face. "About the pack that wants you back." "Everyone knows?" "It's a small territory. People talk." Vera gestured for Nira to walk with her. "What's the question? Should I go back or stay here?" "Wrong question." "What's the right one?" "The right question is, what do you actually want?" Vera stopped and faced her. "Not what would hurt them. Not what would prove a point. What do you want for yourself?" Nira opened her mouth, closed it, realized she didn't have an answer. "Figure that out first," Vera said. Everything else is just noise. That night, Naira stood at her window and forced herself to be brutally honest. What did she want? She wanted to never feel powerless again. She had that here. She wanted respect. She had that too, or at least fear, which was close enough. She wanted. The realization hit her like cold water. She wanted to matter, to be essential, to be someone whose absence would leave a hole. And she already had that. Here, in Shadowcrest. Going back to her birth pack would make her important for what she could fix. Kieran's weakness, the pack's struggles. She'd be a solution to their problems. Staying here made her important for who she was, what she could do. The power she'd built from nothing. The choice was suddenly crystal clear. The next morning, Naira told Kane her decision. I'm staying. Send word to Kieran that I appreciate the offer, but I've found a new home. Kane smiled, actually smiled. Good. I was hoping you'd say that. Why? Because I have another job for you, one that's going to require everything you've learned. He pulled out a letter. Remember how you wanted information about the Northern Pacts? Well, information found you instead. There's a conspiracy. Multiple packs working together to launch a coordinated attack on frontier territories. They want to reclaim the borderlands, push us back, reestablish pack law. Nira's blood ran cold. When? 6 months. Maybe less. They're recruiting, building alliances, and they're targeting Shadowcrest specifically because we're the strongest frontier pack. Kane's expression was grim. We need intelligence, need to know who's involved, what their plans are, how to counter them. And there's only one person I trust to get that information. You want me to go back to pack territories as a spy? I want you to infiltrate the conspiracy. Use your abilities to root out their plans before they can execute them. It's dangerous, probably the most dangerous thing I've ever asked anyone to do. And if I'm caught, then you're dead, and probably tortured first to find out what you told us. Kane leaned forward. I won't order you to do this, but I'm asking, will you? Nira thought about it. Thought about going back to the world that had rejected her, not as a supplicant hoping for acceptance, but as a weapon aimed at their heart. Thought about the risk. The danger. The very real possibility she wouldn't survive. And she smiled. Yes, I'll do it. Because this was better than revenge. This was justice. This was taking everything they'd feared she might become and making it real. This was showing them exactly what they'd created when they tried to throw her away. When do I leave? She asked. 2 weeks. We need time to establish your cover story and set up extraction protocols. Kane stood. Naira, if you pull this off, you'll have saved not just Shadowcrest, but every frontier territory. You'll be a legend. And if I don't, then you'll be a cautionary tale about ambitious wolves who flew too close to the sun. Nira laughed. It came out darker than she'd intended. Either way, they'll remember me. That's the spirit. The next 2 weeks were a blur of preparation. Ronan taught her advanced intelligence gathering techniques. Vera drilled her on combat skills. Beck showed her escape routes and emergency protocols. And late at night, alone in her room, Naira practiced using her power, pushing it further than she ever had before, learning to read deeper, influence stronger, force truth from wolves who desperately wanted to lie. The night before she left, there was a knock on her door. Kane stood in the hallway. Can't sleep either? Too much adrenaline. He handed her a small leather pouch. Emergency funds, false identification papers, and a contact name in case everything goes wrong and you need extraction. Thanks. Naira. He met her eyes. You don't have to do this. I mean it. You've already proven yourself 10 times over. You could stay here, keep building your position, live a long life. This mission, the odds aren't good. I know. Then why? Nira thought about the girl she'd been on bonding night, thought about the wagon, thought about every step of the journey that had brought her here. Because they tried to break me. And I want them to see what I built from the pieces. Kane nodded slowly. Then go make them regret every second of it. She left at dawn, alone. No escort, no backup. Just her and a pack full of supplies and lies. The journey back to pack territories took a week. With every mile, Naira felt herself shifting, becoming someone else. Not the broken exile, not the powerful advisor, someone in between, someone who could slip into pack society and disappear. She crossed into pack lands on a gray morning. The forest felt familiar and alien at the same time. This was where she'd grown up, where she'd believed she'd spend her entire life. Now she was here to destroy it. The cover story was simple. She was a frontier wolf looking for refuge, tired of the lawless territories, willing to submit to pack authority in exchange for safety. Ronan had provided documentation, false but convincing. She approached the nearest pack settlement and requested an audience with their alpha. The interview went exactly as planned. She played the part of a desperate wolf seeking sanctuary, used her power subtly to make herself seem trustworthy, was accepted into the pack on a probationary basis. And then she started listening. It took 3 weeks to make her first contact. A wolf named Marcus, no relation to the one who'd tried to have her killed, who seemed to know more than he should about military movements. Naira befriended him, used her power carefully, never pushing too hard, got him to trust her. And one night, after several drinks, he told her about the conspiracy. "We're taking back what's ours," he slurred. "The frontier territories belonged to pack lands once. We're going to reclaim them, push the lawless wolves back where they belong." How many packs are involved? Dozens. Maybe more. The Northern Alphas have been coordinating, building an army. He leaned closer. And they have a secret weapon. Someone who knows the frontier inside and out. Someone who can tell them exactly where to strike. Nira's blood went cold. "Who?" Marcus grinned. "Can't tell you that. Not yet. But trust me, when we move, the frontier won't know what hit them. A traitor. Someone from the frontier feeding information to pack territories. Exactly the kind of thing Kane needed to know." Naira sent word through the emergency channels that night. Careful, coded, but clear enough that Kane would understand. The response came 3 days later. A single word. Continue. So she continued, dug deeper, built trust, used her power to peel back layers of the conspiracy, and discovered that the traitor from the frontier was someone she knew. Ronan, Kane's own intelligence chief, the wolf who'd helped plan her infiltration mission, who knew exactly where she was and what she was doing. The realization hit her like a punch to the gut. If Ronan was working with pack territories, then he knew she was here. Knew she was gathering intelligence, which meant this whole mission was a trap, and she'd walked right into it. Nira sat in her borrowed room in the pack settlement and forced herself to think through the panic. Ronan was the traitor, which meant he knew where she was, what she was doing, how much she'd discovered. The logical move would be to run, use the extraction protocols, get back to Shadowcrest, warn Kane. But if she ran, the conspiracy would know their cover was blown. They'd accelerate the attack. Shadowcrest and the other frontier territories wouldn't have time to prepare. And more importantly, if she ran now, she'd never get another chance to destroy the people who'd tried to destroy her. Because the conspiracy wasn't just about reclaiming frontier territories. The more Naira had dug, the more she'd realized this was being orchestrated by someone specific. Someone who wanted to prove that wolves like her, outcasts, rejects, frontier survivors, were inferior, dangerous, deserving of being eliminated. Someone like Alpha Marcus, Kieran's father's old advisor, the one who'd convinced the council to sell her in the first place. Marcus had taken over as the head of the Northern Pack Coalition after Kieran's father died, and now he was building an army to wipe out the frontier, to prove he'd been right all along. Naira wasn't going to run from that. She was going to burn it to the ground. But she needed to be smart, needed to think 3 moves ahead. If Ronan knew she was here, he'd be feeding false information to Kane, making Shadowcrest think they had more time than they actually did, setting them up for a devastating surprise attack, which meant Naira needed to get word to Kane without going through official channels, and she needed to do it without alerting Ronan. She had one option, a risky one. Beck had given her an emergency contact before she left, someone in the frontier territories who operated outside Shadowcrest's official network, a wolf named Sage who ran information between territories for the right price. Naira had never planned to use the contact. Going around official channels was a good way to get yourself killed, but official channels were compromised. She spent the next 2 days carefully gathering everything she'd learned: names, dates, attack plans, troop movements. She wrote it all down in code, a cipher Beck had taught her that only a handful of frontier wolves knew. Then she made her way to the border settlement where Sage supposedly operated. The settlement was rough, even by frontier standards. Wolves moved through muddy streets with weapons visible and suspicion in their eyes. Nira kept her head down and her power tightly controlled. One wrong move here and she'd disappear. She found Sage in a tavern that smelled like old blood and cheaper alcohol. Sage was smaller than Nira expected, compact, scarred, with gray-streaked hair and eyes that missed nothing. "You're the truth seeker," Sage said before Nira could introduce herself. "Heard you were dead." "Not yet." "Close enough if you're here," Sage gestured to an empty chair. "What do you want?" "I need to get a message to Alpha Kane, bypassing normal channels." "Normal channels compromised?" "Yes." Sage whistled low. "That's expensive information to move. What's it worth to you?" Nira pulled out half the emergency funds Kane had given her. More money than most frontier wolves saw in a year. Sage counted it, nodded. "That'll do. What's the message?" "Ronan is the traitor. The conspiracy is real and moving faster than we thought. Attack planned for 6 weeks from now, not 6 months. Northern route, coordinated strike on 3 frontier territories simultaneously. Shadowcrest is the primary target." Nira slid the coded papers across the table. "Everything I've learned is in here. Kane needs to see it." "And you?" "I'm staying. I'm going to make sure the conspiracy knows their plan is compromised, but I need Kane to be ready when they move." Sage studied her. "You're either very brave or very stupid. Everyone keeps saying that." "Because it keeps being true." Sage pocketed the money and the papers. "Message will be delivered within 3 days. After that, you're on your own." "I know." Nira returned to the pack settlement. Every instinct screamed at her to be cautious, to hide. But hiding wouldn't accomplish what she needed. She needed to be seen. The next morning, she requested an audience with Marcus, the conspiracy's leader, the man who'd orchestrated her exile. Getting the meeting was easier than expected. Apparently her reputation had preceded her. Marcus received her in what used to be her birth pack's council chamber. Nira hadn't been in this room since she was a child. It looked smaller than she remembered, less impressive. Marcus sat in the Alpha's chair like he'd been born to it. He was older now, maybe 60, with silver hair and a face carved by decades of political maneuvering. "Nira Vale." He said her name like it tasted sour. "I heard you'd come back to Pack Lands, though I admit I'm surprised you had the audacity to request a meeting with me." "I wanted to thank you." That caught him off guard. "Thank me for selling me to the frontier. It was the best thing that ever happened to me." Nira sat without being invited. Let her power flow just enough to make him uncomfortable. "Out there, I learned what I really am, what I'm capable of. Here, I would have spent my whole life trying to be small, acceptable, safe. You were dangerous. You still are." "I was terrified. There's a difference." Nira leaned forward. "But you were right about one thing. I am dangerous, just not in the way you thought." Marcus's expression hardened. "Why are you really here?" "I heard about your conspiracy, the plan to reclaim the frontier, and I wanted to offer my services." Silence. Marcus stared at her like she'd grown a second head. "You want to help us?" "I want to help you destroy the frontier territories." "Yes." Nira kept her voice steady, kept the lie wrapped in just enough truth that her power wouldn't betray her. "I've spent 2 years out there. I've seen what it does to wolves. The lawlessness, the violence, the complete absence of structure. It's chaos, and I'm tired of it." "So you want to come home?" "I want to be part of something that matters, and taking down the frontier, proving that pack law is superior, that matters." Marcus studied her for a long moment. She could feel him trying to decide if she was genuine or playing him. "You have information about the frontier territories," he said finally, "intelligence that would be useful to us." "I do. Why should I trust you?" This was the critical moment. Nira reached for her power. Not to force him, just to make herself absolutely convincing. "Because I'm a truth seeker. You know I can't lie effectively. And I'm telling you the truth. I want the frontier to fall. I want to prove that wolves like me can thrive under pack law. That you were wrong to throw us away." She paused. "Use me. I'm offering myself as a weapon. All I ask in return is that when this is over, I get to be part of the new order you're building." It was a beautiful lie, wrapped in truth, seasoned with exactly the right amount of wounded pride and ambitious desperation. Marcus bought it. You'll work with our intelligence coordinator, he said. Share everything you know. And Naira, if I find out you're lying to me, I'll make your original exile look merciful. Understood. The intelligence coordinator turned out to be someone Naira recognized. Silas. He'd been a mid-ranking warrior in her birth pack. Now he was apparently running Marcus's spy network. He looked at Naira with barely concealed disgust. The truth seeker. Marcus says you're cooperating. I am. We'll see. Silas pulled out maps of the frontier territories. Tell me about Shadowcrest's defenses, guard rotations, weak points, everything, Naira told him. But she was careful. She gave him accurate information about things that didn't matter. Outdated intelligence about guard rotations that had changed, details about defenses that Kane could easily adjust once he got her message. And she wove in just enough truth that Silas couldn't detect the deception. What about the Alpha? Silas asked. Kane. What's his weak point? He trusts too easily. His inner circle is compromised. He doesn't know it yet, but one of his top advisors is feeding information to your side. Silas's eyes gleamed. Who? I don't know the name, but I know Marcus has someone close to Kane, someone who's been passing intelligence for months. It was a risk mentioning Ronan's betrayal, but Naira was gambling that Silas didn't know the traitor's identity, that Marcus had compartmentalized that information. Interesting, Silas said. Anything else? Naira spent the next week feeding Silas a carefully constructed mix of truth and lies. She told him about frontier politics, accurate, about alliance structures, mostly accurate, about Shadowcrest's military capabilities, accurate 2 months ago, but Kane had been building up defenses since then. She made herself invaluable, made them think she was the key to their victory. And all the while, she was gathering her own intelligence, learning the conspiracy's real timeline, their actual attack plans, the location of their staging grounds. She sent it all to Sage in coded messages, trusting that the information was getting to Kane, hoping he was preparing. 3 weeks into her infiltration, something changed. Silas came to her room at dawn. Marcus wants to see you, now. Naira's stomach dropped. Had they figured out what she was doing? She followed Silas to the council chamber. Marcus was there with a dozen other wolves, high-ranking members of the conspiracy, all of them staring at her. We've been impressed with your cooperation, Marcus said. The intelligence you've provided has been invaluable, which is why we're inviting you to participate in the final phase. What final phase? We're moving the attack up 3 weeks from now, and we want you there, using your abilities to interrogate any frontier wolves we capture, to root out resistance before it can organize. Naira forced her expression to stay neutral. 3 weeks. Not 6. They'd accelerated the timeline, which meant either Kane had gotten her messages and they were reacting to his preparations, or something else had spooked them. I'm honored, she said carefully. What do you need from me? Marcus smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. We need you to prove your loyalty. Absolutely and without question. How? There's a frontier settlement on the border. Small. Maybe 50 wolves. They've been causing problems, raiding our supply lines, harassing our scouts. We're going to destroy it, and you're going to help. Naira's blood ran cold. You want me to attack frontier wolves. I want you to demonstrate that you're truly committed to our cause, that you've left your frontier ties behind. Marcus leaned forward. You'll go with Silas's team tomorrow. You'll use your power to extract information from any survivors, and you'll prove that you're one of us. There was no way to refuse without exposing herself, no way to delay. Naira nodded. I'll do it. That night she sent an emergency message to Sage, warning about the settlement attack, begging for evacuation. But she had no way of knowing if it would arrive in time. The attack happened at dawn. 30 wolves descended on the settlement like a hammer. Naira went with them, her stomach churning with horror. The frontier wolves fought back, hard, but they were outnumbered and taken by surprise. Naira watched people die, watched the settlement burn, and hated every second of it. When it was over, Silas dragged 3 survivors in front of her, 2 men and a woman, bloodied, beaten, terrified. Interrogate them, Silas ordered. Find out if they have allies, where their supply caches are. Everything. Naira looked at the prisoners, looked at the wolves watching her, waiting to see if she'd actually do it. She reached for her power, touched the first prisoner's mind, and realized she recognized him. Not his face, but his presence. He was from Shadowcrest, one of the Outer Territory wolves who reported to Vera. If she interrogated him properly, she'd have to expose everything he knew, including information about Shadowcrest's actual defenses. The preparations Kane was making, she'd have to betray her own people to maintain her cover. Nira met the prisoner's eyes, saw the moment he recognized her, saw understanding dawn. He shook his head slightly, telling her not to. She had seconds to decide. Break her cover and save 3 lives, but lose the intelligence she'd been gathering. Or maintain her cover, condemn 3 wolves to death, but keep her position inside the conspiracy. The choice was impossible. So Nira did something no one expected. She used her power. Not on the prisoners. On Silas and every wolf watching. It was the biggest use of her abilities she'd ever attempted. She reached out and wrapped her power around 30 minds simultaneously. Forced them all to freeze, to stop, to listen. "You made a mistake," she said quietly. "You thought I was broken, that I'd forgotten where I came from, that I'd betray my people for acceptance." Silas tried to move. Couldn't. His eyes went wide with rage and fear. "But I never forgot. I never forgave, and I've been feeding you lies for 3 weeks." Nira stepped closer to him. "The information I gave you, mostly worthless. The defenses I described, changed months ago. The weak points, reinforced. You walked into this attack thinking you knew everything about the frontier, but you don't know anything." She could feel her power starting to slip. 30 minds was too many. She couldn't hold them much longer. "The attack you're planning, Shadowcrest knows. They're ready. You're going to walk into a slaughter." Nira pulled out the knife Vera had given her, the one weighted for throwing. "And they're going to remember exactly who warned them." She threw the knife. It caught Silas in the throat exactly like she'd been taught. Her power broke. The wolves surged forward. Nira grabbed one of the prisoners. "Run!" They ran. 4 wolves against 30. It should have been suicide. But Nira had one more card to play. She pulled out the emergency flare Kane had given her, the one that was only supposed to be used if she was about to die and needed immediate extraction. She fired it into the sky. And 3 minutes later, the tree line erupted with Shadowcrest wolves. Vera led the charge. She saw Nira and the prisoners and didn't hesitate. "Get them out of here." Beck appeared at Nira's side. "Can you run?" "I can run." They ran. Behind them, the 2 groups of wolves crashed together. The sounds of battle were deafening. They made it half a mile before Nira's legs gave out. Beck caught her before she hit the ground. "I've got you. Just a little further." They reached the extraction point. Horses waited. Nira had never been so happy to see horses in her life. They rode for 6 hours straight. By the time they reached Shadowcrest territory, Nira was barely conscious. Exhaustion. Power depletion. The crash that came after using abilities far beyond her capacity. Kane was waiting at the gates. He took one look at Nira and said, "Get her to the healers, now." Nira woke up 2 days later in her old room. Every muscle ached. Her head felt like someone had taken an axe to it. Vera was sitting in the chair by her bed. "Welcome back. Did everyone make it out?" "The 3 prisoners are fine. We lost 2 wolves in the extraction. But considering you were outnumbered 15 to 1, that's a miracle." Vera poured water and handed it to Nira. "Sage delivered your messages, all of them. Kane's been preparing for 3 weeks. The attack you warned us about? We're ready." "What about Ronan?" "Arrested the day after your first message arrived. He's been very talkative under interrogation." Vera's expression was grim. "He gave up the entire conspiracy. Names, plans, everything. Says he was promised leadership of Shadowcrest after Marcus took over. Idiot actually believed they'd honor that deal." Nira drank slowly. Her throat was raw. "When's the attack?" 2 weeks. They're still coming. But now we know when and where. We've warned the other territories. They're fortifying, building alliances." Vera smiled. "Turns out nothing unites frontier territories like a common enemy." Kane entered without knocking. He looked at Nira for a long moment. Then, "You broke cover." "I had to. They were going to make me torture frontier wolves to prove my loyalty." "You could have done it. Maintained your position. Gotten more intelligence." "I could have, but I wouldn't have been able to live with myself after." Kane nodded slowly. Good. Because the moment you're willing to sacrifice innocent people for strategy is the moment you become the enemy. He sat on the edge of the bed. You saved 3 lives. You exposed the conspiracy's timeline. You gave us everything we needed to prepare. That's more than I could have asked for. They're still coming. Yes. But now we're ready. And that's because of you. Kane stood. Rest. Heal. When the attack comes, we're going to need you. The next 2 weeks were a blur of preparation. Naira recovered slowly. Her power came back in fits and starts. Using it on 30 wolves simultaneously had nearly burned her out. She'd have to be more careful in the future. If there was a future. The attack came exactly when Marcus's schedule said it would. 300 pack wolves descended on Shadowcrest territory in a coordinated assault. They expected to find a disorganized frontier settlement, weak defenses. Wolves who'd scatter at the first sign of real military opposition. Instead, they found a fortress. Shadowcrest had spent 2 weeks preparing, building defenses, coordinating with other frontier territories, positioning warriors at every weak point. The battle lasted 3 days. Naira spent most of it in the command center with Kane, using her power to interrogate prisoners and verify intelligence. She didn't fight directly, still too weak from the power depletion, but she was invaluable for strategy. On the 3rd day, Marcus himself arrived with reinforcements. One last desperate push to break through Shadowcrest's defenses. Kane met him on the battlefield, Alpha versus conspiracy leader. The fight was brutal and one-sided. Marcus was older, slower. He'd spent too many years behind a desk and not enough training. Kane broke him in 10 minutes. Marcus knelt in the dirt, bleeding, defeated. The pack wolves behind him saw their leader fall, and the fight went out of them. Kane stood over Marcus. Surrender, now, or I'll kill every wolf you brought with you. Marcus looked up. His eyes found Naira standing at the edge of the battlefield. You, he spat. This is your fault. You poisoned everything. No, Naira said quietly. You did that yourself when you decided to throw away anyone who didn't fit your perfect vision of what a wolf should be. Kane pressed his blade to Marcus's throat. Surrender. We surrender. The remaining pack wolves laid down their weapons. The battle was over. Shadowcrest had won. That night there was celebration in the main hall. Wolves drinking and laughing and telling stories about the battle. Naira sat at the high table and watched it all with a strange sense of disconnection. She'd done it. She'd exposed the conspiracy, helped defend the frontier, proven herself beyond any doubt. So why did she feel empty? Vera dropped into the seat beside her. You look like someone who just won a war and can't figure out how to feel about it. Is that what this is? Winning? 300 pack wolves tried to destroy us. They failed. We're still here. That's winning. Vera poured 2 cups of something that smelled like it could strip paint. Drink. You've earned it. Naira drank. It burned. What happens now? Now we rebuild. Strengthen alliances between frontier territories. Make sure this never happens again. Vera studied her. And you become a legend. The truth seeker who exposed a conspiracy and saved the frontier. Songs will be written about you. I don't want songs. Too bad. You don't get to choose what you become to other people. Vera clinked her cup against Naira's. But you do get to choose what you become to yourself. So what's it going to be? Naira thought about that question for a long time. She'd spent so long focused on revenge, on proving herself, on showing her birth pack exactly what they'd lost when they rejected her. But sitting here, in a hall full of wolves who'd fought beside her, who'd trusted her with their lives, she realized something. Revenge didn't matter anymore. She'd already won, not by destroying her enemies, but by building something they could never take away. A place where she mattered, where she was valued for exactly who she was, where her power wasn't something to fear, but something to be used for good. I want to stay, Naira said. I want to keep building this, make the frontier into something better than what we escaped from. Vera smiled. Good answer. The next morning, Kane called a council meeting, all the frontier alphas who'd participated in the defense. They gathered in Shadowcrest's war room to discuss the future. The frontier territories have proven we can work together, Kane said. The question is whether we continue that cooperation or go back to our old rivalries. We continue. That was Alpha Darius. We've seen what happens when Packlands gets organized against us. We need to be organized too. Agreed, said another Alpha. But who leads this organization? Everyone looked at Kane. He was the strongest, the most respected, the obvious choice. But Kane shook his head. Not me. I'm good at war, not at peace. What we need now is someone who can navigate politics, someone who can see through lies and find truth, someone every territory trusts because her power makes deception impossible. He looked directly at Naira. I nominate Naira Vale as the first arbiter of the Frontier Coalition. She'll serve as a neutral party, resolving disputes, verifying treaties, making sure we don't tear ourselves apart from the inside. Naira's mouth went dry. I'm 20 years old, and you've accomplished more in 2 years than most wolves do in a lifetime. Kane's expression was serious. You exposed 2 different conspiracies, saved Shadowcrest twice, united the frontier territories. You've earned this. One by one, the other alphas nodded agreement. Darius stood. All in favor? Every hand went up. Nira looked around the room at these powerful wolves, alphas who commanded territories, who'd survived decades of frontier violence, all of them accepting her authority. It was surreal, impossible, everything she'd never dared to dream. I accept, she said quietly, and I promise to serve the frontier with everything I have. That night, alone in her room, Naira stood at the window and looked out at Shadowcrest. Lights burned in windows across the estate. Wolves moved through the courtyard, life continuing. She thought about the girl she'd been on bonding night. Broken, rejected, sold like cargo. That girl was dead. But something better had been born from the ashes. Someone who'd learned that power wasn't about being the strongest or the most feared. It was about being essential, about making yourself so valuable that people couldn't afford to lose you. Someone who'd discovered that the best revenge wasn't destruction. It was becoming exactly what your enemies feared you might be, and then using that power to build something they could never touch. Nira smiled at her reflection in the glass. Let her birth pack hear about this. Let Kieran and Marcus and everyone who'd cast her out learn that the girl they'd thrown away had become the first arbiter of the Frontier Coalition. Let them know that their rejection had created their worst nightmare. A wolf with power, with influence, with every reason to remember what they'd done. She wouldn't go back for revenge. She didn't need to. She'd already won. And that victory was sweeter than any revenge could ever be. The victory should have felt complete. But 3 weeks after being named First Arbiter, Naira received a message that shattered her carefully constructed peace. Kieran was dying. The letter came through official channels, sealed with her birth pack's insignia, written in formal language that barely disguised the desperation underneath. The rejected bond is killing him, the letter explained. Without resolution, Alpha Kieran will not survive another month. We request that First Arbiter Naira Vale consider a meeting to discuss possible reconciliation, for humanitarian reasons. Nira read it 3 times, then burned it. She didn't owe Kieran anything, didn't owe her birth pack mercy or consideration or even acknowledgement. They'd made their choice 2 years ago. Now they could live with the consequences. But the letter kept finding her. Different messengers, different wording, same desperate plea. After the 5th one, Kane cornered her in the war room. You can't ignore this forever. Watch me. Naira. He said her name quietly, seriously. A dying alpha creates instability. If Kieran falls, your birth pack will fracture. Some other wolf will seize power, probably someone worse than Marcus was. And that instability will spread to neighboring territories. Not my problem. It is when you're the first arbiter. Your job is to maintain peace across all territories, pack lands included. Kane sat across from her. I'm not saying you have to save him. I'm saying you have to at least meet with them, hear what they're proposing. Then make your decision from a position of strength rather than avoidance. Naira wanted to argue, wanted to say that she'd earned the right to never see those people again. But Kane was right. She had responsibilities now, and those responsibilities didn't care about her personal feelings. Fine, she said. I'll meet with them, but on my terms, in frontier territory, with my people present. Fair enough. The meeting was arranged for 2 weeks later. Neutral ground, a settlement on the border between Packlands and frontier territory. Naira brought Vera, Beck, and a dozen Shadowcrest guards. Her birth pack sent a delegation of 5, including Kieran. Naira saw him from across the meeting hall and barely recognized him. He'd lost weight. His skin had a grayish tint. He moved like every step hurt. The rejected bond was eating him alive from the inside. Good, a dark part of Naira thought. Let him suffer like I suffered. But another part, smaller, quieter, felt something uncomfortably close to pity. They sat across from each other at a long table. Kieran's advisors on his side, Naira's people on hers. "Thank you for coming," Kieran said. His voice was hoarse, rough. "I wasn't sure you would. I'm here as first arbiter, not as Naira Vale." She kept her tone neutral, professional. "Your letter mentioned reconciliation. Explain what that means." One of Kieran's advisors, an older woman Naira vaguely remembered, spoke up. "The rejected bond is killing Alpha Kieran. The Pack's healers believe that if the bond can be restored, both he and you would heal. I'm not sick, not physically, but the bond affects both parties. You've been experiencing symptoms too, haven't you? Trouble sleeping, mood swings, a sense of emptiness you can't explain." Naira had been experiencing all of those things. She'd assumed it was stress, the weight of her new position, not bond sickness. "What are you proposing?" she asked carefully. Kieran leaned forward. "I want to reverse the rejection, restore the bond, make you my mate and co-alpha of the Pack." The room went silent. Naira stared at him. "You're joking." "I'm not. I was wrong, Naira. The council was wrong. My father was wrong. We let fear drive our decisions, and we threw away something precious." Kieran's eyes were earnest, desperate. "Come home. Help me lead the Pack. We could build something better together." It was the apology she'd dreamed of hearing, the validation she'd craved, everything she'd wanted 2 years ago when she stood in that bonding circle. And it meant nothing. "No," Naira said. Kieran blinked. "What?" "I said no. I'm not coming back. I'm not restoring the bond. And I'm definitely not going to be your mate." Naira stood. "You don't want me, Kieran. You want a solution to your problem. You want to survive. That's not the same as actually wanting me. That's not fair." "Fair?" Naira laughed, came out bitter. "You rejected me in front of the entire Pack, called me cursed, unworthy, let them sell me like property, and now that you're dying from the consequences of that choice, you want me to fix it for you?" "I'm sorry." Kieran stood too, swaying slightly. "I know I hurt you. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I'm asking anyway. Please, help me fix this." Naira looked at him, really looked at him, and realized something important. She didn't hate him anymore. She didn't love him either. Didn't feel anything except a distant sort of pity for a wolf who'd made terrible choices and was now facing the consequences. "I can't fix this," she said quietly, "because I'm not the same person you rejected. That girl died in a wagon on the way to the frontier. What's standing in front of you now is someone else entirely. Someone who doesn't fit into your Pack. Someone who's built a life you can't be part of." "Then what am I supposed to do?" Kieran's voice cracked. "Just accept death? You're supposed to live with your choices, the same way I've had to live with mine." Naira turned to leave, then paused. "But I'll tell you what I'll do. As first arbiter, I'll send healers to your Pack, wolves who specialize in bond magic. They might be able to find a way to sever the connection completely. Let you move on, find another mate." "That's not possible. Once a bond is rejected by Pack law, it's considered permanent. But frontier magic works differently. We're not bound by the same rules." Naira met his eyes. "I'm offering you a chance to actually heal, to move forward instead of backwards. Take it or don't. Your choice." She walked out. Her people followed. Behind her, she could hear Kieran's advisors arguing in frantic whispers. Vera caught up to her in the courtyard. "That was cold." "That was necessary. You could have helped him. Restored the bond. You'd have gotten everything you wanted 2 years ago. 2 years ago, I wanted acceptance, belonging, a place in a Pack that would never actually value me." Naira stopped and looked back at the meeting hall. "Now I want something different, and I'm not willing to sacrifice it for someone who only wants me when he needs something." Vera smiled. "Good, because that's the difference between a victim and a survivor. Victims want revenge. Survivors want peace. But peace, Naira was learning, required one more step. She sent the healers as promised. Frontier wolves skilled in bond magic. They worked with Kieran's pack for 2 months, and eventually, miraculously, they found a way to sever the rejected bond completely. The process was painful for both of them. Naira spent 3 days in bed feeling like something was being torn out of her chest. When it was over, she felt lighter, free in a way she hadn't been since that bonding night. Kieran survived, recovered, eventually found another mate, a wolf from a neighboring pack who actually wanted him. And Naira moved on. Her first year as first arbiter was brutal. She mediated 17 territorial disputes, negotiated 6 trade agreements, exposed 2 more conspiracies, smaller than Marcus's, but still dangerous. Used her power to verify treaties and uncover deception and build trust between wolves who'd been enemies for generations. She made mistakes, trusted the wrong people, made decisions that hurt innocent wolves, learned that leadership wasn't about being perfect. It was about making the best choice you could with imperfect information and then living with the consequences. But slowly, painfully, the Frontier Coalition became real, became stable, became something that mattered. 18 months after taking the position, Naira received another visitor from her past. Her mother, Clara Vale, showed up at Shadowcrest gates alone, older, grayer, but still recognizably the woman who'd raised Naira. Naira almost refused to see her, but curiosity won out. They met in a private room, just the 2 of them, no guards, no witnesses. Clara looked at Naira for a long moment. "You look different." "I am different. I heard about what you've accomplished. First Arbiter, the wolf who saved the frontier." Clara's voice was soft. "Proud? Or maybe just sad? I'm happy for you."
Why are you here, Mom?
"Because I needed to see you, to tell you in person. I'm sorry. For everything, for not fighting harder to keep you, for letting them sell you, for choosing the pack over my own daughter." Clara's eyes were wet. "I've regretted it every day since." Naira had imagined this conversation 1,000 times. In some versions, she screamed. In others, she forgave immediately. In most, she said something cutting and perfect that made her mother understand exactly how much she'd been hurt. But now that it was actually happening, all she felt was tired. "I can't forgive you," she said quietly. "Not yet. Maybe not ever. What you did, what all of you did, it broke something in me, and even though I've built something new from the pieces, that doesn't erase the damage. I understand. But," Naira took a breath, "I don't hate you either. I'm just done. Done carrying that anger. Done letting what happened control my life, so I'm letting it go. Not for you, for me." Clara nodded. Tears spilled down her cheeks. "That's more than I deserve. Probably. But it's all I have to give." They talked for another hour. Carefully. Cautiously. Not as mother and daughter. As 2 wolves who'd once been family and were now strangers trying to find common ground. When Clara left, Naira felt something shift inside her. The last piece of the old wound closing over. Not healed, she didn't think she'd ever fully heal, but sealed, finished. She could move forward now, really forward. 2 years after becoming First Arbiter, Naira stood before the full Frontier Coalition Assembly, representatives from every territory. Over 300 wolves gathered to hear her annual report. She'd been dreading this speech for weeks, not because the news was bad, but because she had something to announce that would change everything. "The Frontier Coalition is stable," she began. "Trade routes are secure. Territorial disputes are down 70%. We've successfully defended against 3 attempted invasions from packlands. By every measure, we've succeeded beyond what anyone thought possible." Applause. Naira waited for it to die down, which is why I'm announcing the next phase. We're going to stop being reactive and start being proactive. We're going to create actual laws, establish courts, build infrastructure, transform the frontier from a lawless territory into a functional society. Murmurs, some approving, some skeptical. "I know what you're thinking. That sounds like pack law." And you're right, it does. But here's the difference. We're going to build a system that doesn't require anyone to be small, or hide who they are, or sacrifice their power for acceptance. Naira looked around the room. "We're going to create a place where wolves like me, wolves who don't fit anywhere else, can thrive. Not despite who we are, but because of it. That's a pretty dream, someone called out. But how do you enforce it? With something Packlands never had. Truth. Nira let her power flow into her voice, just enough that everyone could feel it. I propose creating an arbiter corps, truth seekers and other wolves with abilities that detect deception. They'll serve as judges, investigators, guarantors of fair treatment, no corruption, no lies. Just wolves with power holding other wolves with power accountable. And who holds the arbiters accountable? That was Darius. Each other. And me. And all of you. Nira met his eyes. I'm not proposing a dictatorship. I'm proposing a system where power is distributed, where no single wolf can control everything, where we build something better than what we came from. The debate lasted 4 hours, but in the end, the vote was unanimous. The Arbiter Corps would be established, the frontier would evolve, and Nira would lead that evolution. That night, she celebrated with her inner circle, Vera, Beck, Kane, and a dozen other wolves who'd become her family. You did it, Vera said, raising her cup. You actually did it. Turned the frontier into something real. We did it, Nira corrected. All of us. Don't be modest. This was your vision, Kane smiled. The question is, what's next? You've achieved everything you set out to do, proven yourself beyond any doubt. Where do you go from here? Nira had been thinking about that question. I want to find more wolves like me, outcasts, rejects, the ones Packlands throws away. I want to bring them here, show them they can build something better. A recruitment program for broken wolves? Beck grinned. I like it. Not broken, never broken. Nira's voice was firm. Bent, tested, forged into something stronger. There's a difference. 5 years after her rejection, Nira stood at the border between Packlands and frontier territory. She'd been invited to a summit. Pack Alphas wanted to discuss a formal peace treaty with the Frontier Coalition. She'd brought a small delegation, and she'd insisted the meeting take place here, on the border. Neither fully in Pack territory nor frontier, equal ground. The Pack Alphas arrived with full ceremony. Kieran was among them, healthy now, mated, looking every inch the confident alpha he was supposed to be. Their eyes met across the meeting space. He nodded once. She nodded back. No words needed. They'd both moved on. The treaty negotiations took 3 days. The Pack Alphas wanted assurances, guarantees that the frontier wouldn't expand into their territories, that trade would remain fair, that outcasts and criminals wouldn't be harbored. Nira negotiated hard, got them to agree to something revolutionary. Any wolf who wants to leave Packlands can come to the frontier. No questions asked, no pursuit, no retribution. She looked around the table. You don't want them? Fine. We do. But you don't get to sell them anymore. You don't get to profit from throwing away wolves you consider defective. That's asking us to give up a significant revenue stream, one alpha said. I'm asking you to stop treating people like property. Nira's voice was steel. Accept that term, or there's no treaty. They accepted. The treaty was signed at sunset, witnessed by wolves from both sides. A historic moment, the first time Packlands and frontier territories had recognized each other as equals. After the ceremony, Kieran approached her. Can we talk? Just for a minute? Nira considered refusing, but curiosity won. 1 minute. They walked to the edge of the gathering, far enough from the others to have privacy. I wanted to say thank you, Kieran said, for sending those healers, for giving me a chance to actually heal. I wouldn't be here without that. You're welcome. And I wanted to say I was wrong about everything. You weren't cursed. You weren't dangerous. You were just different. And I was too scared and too stupid to see that difference could be valuable. Nira looked at him. Do you want me to tell you it's okay? That I forgive you? No, I know it's not okay. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. Kieran met her eyes. I just wanted you to know that I see what you've built, and I'm in awe of it. You took everything we threw at you, all that pain and rejection, and you turned it into something extraordinary. That takes a kind of strength I'll never have. It was probably the most honest thing he'd ever said to her. Thank you, Nira said quietly. That means something. They stood in silence for a moment. Then Kieran smiled. For what it's worth, I think you would have been a terrible Pack Alpha's mate. You're meant for bigger things. Naira laughed, actually laughed. Yeah, I think you're right. They parted as friends, or at least as two wolves who'd both learned from their mistakes and come out better for it. 10 years after her rejection, Naira stood before the first graduating class of the Arbiter Corps. 25 wolves who'd trained for 2 years, who'd learned to use their abilities for justice rather than survival, who would spread across the frontier and make sure the system she'd built actually worked. She looked at their faces, saw wolves from packlands and frontier territories, saw truth seekers and empaths and wolves with abilities she hadn't even known existed, saw the future. You're going to face impossible situations, she told them. You're going to have to make decisions where every option is bad. You're going to see corruption and cruelty and wolves who use power to hurt others, and you're going to want to give up, to walk away, to decide it's not worth it. She paused. Let her words sink in. Don't. Because every time you expose a lie, every time you stand up for a wolf who can't stand up for themselves, every time you choose justice over convenience, you're proving that power doesn't have to corrupt, that wolves who've been broken can build something better than what broke them. She looked at each of them. You're proof that outcasts and rejects and wolves who don't fit anywhere else can change the world. Don't ever forget that. The ceremony ended with an oath, each new arbiter swearing to serve truth above all else, to use their power for good, to never become the kind of wolves who'd hurt them. After, Vera found Naira. Good speech. I meant every word. I know, that's what made it good. Vera handed her a cup of something that probably wasn't legal. You've built something that'll outlast you. You know that, right? Long after you're gone, wolves will tell stories about the truth seeker who saved the frontier. I don't want stories. I want the system to work. You'll get both. Vera clinked her cup against Naira's. Because you didn't just save the frontier, you changed what it means to be powerful. Showed wolves that strength isn't about dominance. It's about being essential. That night, alone in her quarters, Naira thought about the journey that had brought her here. She thought about the girl in the bonding circle, desperate for acceptance, terrified of her own power. She thought about the wagon, the silver chains, the moment she'd decided to survive no matter what it took. She thought about every choice she'd made, every wolf she'd trusted, every time she'd risked everything for a chance at something better. And she realized something important. She wouldn't change any of it, not the rejection, not the pain, not even the worst moments when she'd thought she wouldn't survive. Because all of it, every terrible, brutal, soul-crushing moment had been necessary, had shaped her into someone capable of building something that mattered. The frontier territories weren't perfect. The Arbiter Corps would make mistakes. The systems she'd created would be tested and sometimes fail. But they existed, and they were better than what came before. That was enough. More than enough. 15 years after her rejection, Naira received one final message from her birth pack. It was from the new Alpha, not Kieran, who'd retired and passed leadership to someone younger. The message was simple. They wanted to formally apologize, to acknowledge what they'd done to her, to ask if she would accept a public recognition of their mistake. Naira read the letter twice, then put it aside. She didn't need their apology, didn't need their recognition or validation or acknowledgement. She'd stopped needing anything from them years ago. But she wrote back anyway, because she was the first arbiter, because building peace meant extending grace even when it wasn't deserved. She told them yes, she would accept their apology, not because she needed it, but because other wolves needed to see that packs could admit mistakes, that power structures could change, that the old ways didn't have to be permanent. The ceremony was held on the anniversary of her rejection. 20 years to the day since Kieran had stood in that bonding circle and spoken the words that shattered her world. Naira returned to Pack lands for the first time in 2 decades, brought her entire delegation, made it clear she was coming as an equal, not a supplicant. The current Alpha, a young woman named Sarah, met her at the border. Thank you for coming. I know this can't be easy. It's just closure, nothing more. They walked to the ceremony grounds together, the same place where Naira had been rejected, but it looked different now, smaller, less impressive. The pack had gathered, hundreds of wolves, including some who'd been there that night 20 years ago. including her parents, who stood at the back and wouldn't meet her eyes. Sarah stood before them all. 20 years ago, this pack made a terrible mistake. We rejected one of our own, cast her out, sold her into exile. We did this out of fear, because we didn't understand her power, because we valued conformity over individuality. The crowd was silent, listening. Today, we formally apologize to Naira Vale, first arbiter of the Frontier Coalition, for the harm we caused her. We acknowledge that our actions were wrong, that she deserved better, and we ask, not for forgiveness because we know we don't deserve it, but for the opportunity to learn from our mistakes. It was a good apology, sincere, public, everything Naira had once dreamed of hearing, and it didn't matter because she'd already forgiven them. Not for them, for herself. Sarah turned to Naira. Would you like to say anything? Naira stepped forward, looked at the crowd, saw wolves who'd cheered her exile, wolves who'd thrown stones, wolves who'd called her cursed. She saw her parents, older, broken by guilt, still unable to look at her. She saw the place where she'd stood that night, young, terrified, desperate for acceptance. And she smiled. I'm not going to tell you that I forgive you, she said, her voice carried across the gathering. Because forgiveness is personal, complicated, and honestly, I'm still working on it. Some wolves looked uncomfortable. Good. But I will tell you this. Thank you. That got their attention. Thank you for rejecting me, for selling me, for forcing me out of my comfortable life and into something that terrified me. Naira's voice was strong, certain. Because if you hadn't, I'd still be here, hiding my power, making myself small, trying to fit into a system that would never actually value me. She let that sink in. Instead, I got to build something new, something better, a place where wolves like me, wolves who don't fit anywhere else, can thrive. And I got to prove that being different isn't a curse, it's a gift. Naira looked directly at Sarah. So keep your apology. I don't need it, but use it to do better. Stop throwing away wolves who scare you. Stop punishing difference. Start building a pack where every wolf, no matter what their abilities are, can find a place to belong. She turned to leave, then paused. And if you can't do that, if you keep making the same mistakes, then those wolves will find their way to the frontier, and we'll welcome them. Because we've learned what you still don't understand, that the wolves you throw away are often the ones capable of changing the world. She walked away. Her delegation followed. Behind her, the pack stood in stunned silence. Naira didn't look back. That evening, sitting around a fire with her closest friends, Naira finally felt something settle inside her. The last piece of the old wound closing, the last thread of anger releasing. How do you feel? Beck asked. Free, Naira said, and meant it. Vera raised her cup. To freedom, and to broken wolves who refused to stay broken. They drank, and talked late into the night about the future, about expansion plans for the Arbiter Corps, about new alliances to build, about wolves who still needed saving. And Naira realized something that made her smile. She'd started this journey looking for revenge, for validation, for proof that she mattered. She'd found something better, purpose, family, a place where she belonged not because she fit in, but because she'd built something big enough to contain her. The girl who'd been rejected and sold as nothing had become the architect of a new world. And that world, imperfect, evolving, constantly challenging, was exactly where she was meant to be. 25 years after her rejection, Naira stood at the dedication ceremony for the first Truth Seeker Academy, a place where young wolves with her abilities could learn to use their power safely, ethically, in service of something bigger than themselves. The building was beautiful, stone and wood, windows that caught the light, rooms filled with books and training equipment and everything a young truth seeker might need. She walked through it with a sense of wonder. This was real. This existed. Because she'd survived. Because she'd refused to stay broken. A young wolf approached her, maybe 12 years old, nervous. Are you really the first arbiter? I am. The one who was rejected by her mate and sold to the frontier and built the whole coalition? Naira smiled. That's the story they tell. Is it true? Parts of it. The story leaves out a lot, like how scared I was, how many mistakes I made, how many times I wanted to give up. The young wolf frowned. But you didn't give up. No, I didn't because I learned something important. Naira knelt down to the girl's level. Power isn't about being perfect. It's about being persistent. about getting knocked down and standing back up, about using whatever gifts you have, even the ones that scare people, to build something worth building. I want to be like you. Don't, Nira said it gently. Be better than me. Learn from my mistakes. Build something even bigger. That's how we move forward. The girl nodded seriously, then ran off to join her classmates. Vera appeared at Nira's side. Getting sentimental in your old age? I'm 39. That's not old. It is when you've lived 3 lifetimes worth of experiences. Vera looked at the academy. You did good, Nira. Really good. We did good. All of us. That night, Nira sat at her desk and wrote a letter. Not to anyone specific, just words she needed to say, lessons she'd learned, truths she wanted to preserve. To any wolf reading this who feels broken, who's been rejected or cast out or told they're not enough, listen to me. You are not what they said you were. You are not cursed. You are not dangerous. You are not a mistake. You are powerful, and power scares people. They'll try to make you small to make themselves feel safe. They'll reject you, hurt you, try to break you down until you fit into boxes that were never meant to contain you. Don't let them. Instead, take that power and build something they can't touch. Something that proves broken wolves are actually the strongest kind. Because we've survived what should have killed us. We've learned to turn pain into purpose. And we know, deep in our bones, that true power isn't about dominance or control. It's about being essential. About making yourself so valuable that the world can't afford to lose you. So get up, stand up, build something that matters. And when they finally realize what they lost when they threw you away, smile. Because by then, you'll have already won. She signed it simply. Someone who survived. And she meant it. Because survival, real survival, wasn't about revenge or validation or proving yourself to people who'd hurt you. It was about building a life so full of purpose that the past couldn't touch it. It was about taking every terrible thing that happened and transforming it into something beautiful. It was about becoming the exact thing your enemies feared you might be, and then using that power to help others instead of harm them. That was the real victory. That was what it meant to be unbroken. And as Nira Vale, first arbiter, truth seeker, architect of the Frontier Coalition, looked out at the world she'd built from the ashes of her rejection, she finally understood. She hadn't just survived her exile, she'd transcended it. And in doing so, she had proven something that would echo through generations. True power isn't taken, it's chosen, it's built. It's earned through persistence and pain, and refusing to accept that broken means defeated. The wolves who'd rejected her were long gone. The systems that had tried to destroy her had crumbled. The fear that had driven her exile had been replaced by something better. Hope. And that hope, fragile, persistent, absolutely unbreakable, would outlast them all.